99 girls whittled down to 54, but we still have a long way to go before we create the final 9-member girl group, and boy, will a lot of stuff happen before we get there. Evil editing, angel editing, invisibility, tears of joy and sadness, fan outrage and member hate, and one of, if not the most despised segments of any reality show ever. That's right, I am talking about Dion's house. As we get closer and closer to the end of the show, we see more and more how experimental Girls' Planet was, and just how it managed to create a group which kind of revived Produce, but also may well have killed Produce once and for all. How on earth did this show and its editing and production create what ended up being the first Produce group to fail, Kepler? Welcome to my part 2 of my Girls' Planet 999 video, which explores the various editing and production choices the show made, and how this influenced the audience's opinion of certain trainees and teams, and also how it led to Mnet getting a lot of their favourite trainees into the finale. We've looked at things like evil editing and angel editing, the specific mechanics of how they are created, and the motivation behind them, and we've discussed the potential psychological impacts of these things on both the trainees and the audience. In part 2, I discussed the history of Girls' Planet and the reasons why I wanted to make the episode. Basically that, although a lot of people complain about Mnet's editing, very few people actually talk about the specifics and how they influence our perception of trainees and performances. For instance, how a performance can be edited with music, sound effects, camera work, and reactions to make it seem either far worse or far better than it actually was. I also discussed my eventual ideal top 9 which came out of the show: Ziyin, Wonjae, Shana, Suyeon, Bora, Yujin, Youngun, Yanning, and Mashiro, a nice 4K 3C 2J ratio. Then I discussed episodes 1 through 6, discussing the specific editing choices that were made, as well as some of the interesting production choices and why they were made. For example, putting Xiaoting, CO1, in a group with the lowest ranking C group trainees in a song that suited her and her skills far more than said other trainees. This was a clear way to make Xiaoting stand out more and thus to shine and seem more skilled in comparison to other trainees than she actually was. This was done to a lesser extent for Hikaru, and Dion was likely put in a group with 2 other skilled trainees to make her stand out less, thus helping the judges justify not giving her a top 9 sticker. But if you want to hear more about that, I'm afraid you will just have to watch part 1. In this episode, I will discuss the editing of episodes 7 through 12, and then we'll discuss the major characters and storylines the show created. This will include both good and bad storylines, the winners and losers. Basically, anyone who was particularly memorable from a relatively neutral perspective at the end of the show, and I will discuss how their stories were created. I'll then explore how the show was different from Produce and from Boys' Planet based on my currently limited knowledge of Produce, and how the experimental nature of Girls' Planet made Boys' Planet a better show. At the end, I'll discuss some key takeaways from the show and its legacy and impact on the K-pop industry and specifically Produce. So let's pick up where we left off, partway through the combination mission at the start of episode 7. At the end of episode 6, the Fate performance was teased to us, and I unintentionally teased you all with the rest of it as well. We were given the backstory of this Avengers team with tons of top 9 members having actual struggles, and somehow being given an underdog arc despite their skills. The storyline of this performance revolved around Yeso, the centre, and the criticism that the team got despite their skills. Many of these members, especially Yujin, was super popular during the show, and the reason that Mnet showed the anxiety-inducing backstory of the team, and then cut the episode just at the moment when we were wondering whether Yeso would be able to complete the performance well, was precisely to make the audience nervous and anticipate this performance more, which means that they'll tune into the next episode ready to see Yujin, Yeso, and the rest of their team with, of course, hopes that they will succeed. And then, of course, Mnet will hold the Fate performance back until it's the last performance, to keep people watching and invested even more. This is a common tactic that Mnet uses, teasing anticipated performances and then holding them back in the next episode to keep people watching. Most notably, it was used throughout the whole of Girls Planet and even in this episode for this team, where Yujin's performances were almost always left to last since she had a large fan base. It was also used in Boys Planet with Hui and in Island 2 with Ji-yoon's anticipated performance of Like Oo Ah, which was kept back an episode from the other performances, and also where Jimin's introductory performance of Drama was also kept for last. So with that said, let's actually talk about episode 7. Of course, Fate is teased again and will be kept for last. Instead, we move to All About You, which is instantly painted with a contrast between Miyu and Xing Chao, who have made various performance mistakes, and Ye Young, who is a skilled trainee and painted as a pillar of the team. This is done through the typical Mnet tense music plus zooms and sound effects combo. Ye Young is the main character here since she is clearly the one that Mnet likes the most out of this team. She is the one who helps the team, is complimented by the other members who feel like they're letting her down, and who is shown as a hard worker and someone who has a desperate dream. Yet another underdog arc for someone who really shouldn't have been given an underdog arc. Interestingly, despite this editing, she got eliminated in the next episode and Xing Chao made it to the finale. Anyway, Ye Young is the highlight of this performance, of course, and she is described as the main vocal of the debut team, so Mnet were definitely very upset when she was eliminated. I was kind of surprised she didn't get the Planet Pass, but we'll come back to the Planet Pass later. After that, we move on to Mafia in the Morning, where the powerful music shows them as a powerful team with a strong image. In practice, they are praised for picking a good concept, which is in heavy contrast to many of the previous teams who were criticised. Ji-won is highlighted for her intelligence in letting the others have the spotlight, and Mashiro's intelligence is highlighted through adding choreography, a smart choice since groups with choreographies tend to be far better received and more widely watched in survival shows. But all of these positives are, in typical Mnet fashion, contrasted with their eventual criticism in the interims, as they had a boring ending and misinterpreted the concept. But this criticism is softened with praise, which makes it seem not too harsh, even though other groups have been given some seriously harsh feedback. This makes us, as the audience, think that this performance has a chance of winning and that this team is just good in general. Mashiro struggling with being too kind is also an interesting highlight, since it gives her an underdog arc and also highlights her personality as someone who literally can't hurt a fly. She's also highlighted as being cool as opposed to pretty, kind, or cute before the performance, which suits the concept and shows how Mashiro can be very versatile, which is an important factor when choosing final group members. Also, fun fact, Yaning is highlighted as having some knowledge of being spiteful, which makes us recall her introduction as a villainous character, which adds to her bad girl image. Anyway, the performance itself. It starts with the question of whether they'll actually be able to look spiteful, which means, of course, that they will do a great job. Each of them gets a good highlight, and the fireworks and judge reactions make this performance seem like the best thing ever, especially with one star looking happy with their highlights. Mashiro gets the ideal camera work for her parts, which especially highlight her facial expressions, and of course, as the main character of this performance, she gets lots of cheers at the end. Interestingly, I really liked how they changed the lyrics of the song to suit their story and concept. The team, of course, gets tons of praise, and the members go to hug Mashiro specifically, which highlights her further as the main character. Moving on to a less smooth sailing performance, VVS. Although everyone looks happy in the interim, they still get criticised for their interpretation of the concept. Chaeyeon is shown as the leader and the most competent, and this leads to the incompetent edit that Zhao gets. This is yet another example of the invisible Japanese member, a Chinese villain, and Korean hero edit. I don't even know the name of the Japanese girl in this group. That's how invisible she was. While Zhao is painted as continually letting the team down, and Chaeyeon is shown to be by far the most competent. She gets the other teams helping her. That is how incompetent Zhao seems to be. The unfortunate thing about this is that it shows another aspect of Mnet's editing, cutting together specific moments to make something seem worse than it actually is. Zhao probably didn't go to the bathroom much more than the other members, but by cutting together the many times that she did, and not including the moments where the other members went to the bathroom, she seems to be going far more. I heard a rumour at some point that Zhao was sick during this preparation period, and that was why she had to go to the bathroom more often, but I'm not sure if this is actually true. Either way, it just shows how illnesses will be used against trainees and how even if you aren't sick, if Mnet doesn't like you or wants you out or even just thinks you'd be good for drama, you can't do even the most harmless of things on camera because Mnet will edit you out of context and will add some tense music and zooms to make you seem far worse than you actually were. Anyway, the actual performance is shown to be fine. Chaeyeon is shown to do a better job than before and her mistakes aren't highlighted, which makes us see her in a better light. At the end of the day, the judges grimacing makes us think that this wasn't actually that good, and the use of the word prevailed to describe the performance adds to this idea that they did fine but not great. The only real bonus about this is that Chaeyeon gets highlighted as feeling bad and being humble, and that they were told that they can improve. Zhao making excuses with clown music playing means that her personality, as perceived by the audience, is well and truly run into the ground. She has been seen as unskilled, incompetent, annoying, a letdown, and now seems to be blaming everyone and everything other than herself for the lacking performance. It's no wonder she got eliminated after an edit like that. Moving on to My C, we instantly get nervous as we are told it's a hard song. Although Chaehyun is highlighted in this to some extent, she's already had a highlight in Yes or Yes, so the main character of this team is instead Shana. Shana has an underdog arc of lacking confidence, and she has further to fall since the Masters have high expectations for the team. This is carried out when she is the most disappointing in the team and carries the whole pressure of the group performance on her shoulders. Thus, she is implied to be bringing the performance down. The later rehearsals show that the Masters have faith in Shana and her improvement and skills, contrasted with the mistake that Ji-yoon makes, making us the audience think that Shana would have been a better fit for the part, especially since Shana is also humble. The actual performance is shown to be very good, with many of the other trainees on the verge of tears, and the lack of clapping suggests the audience are just stunned with the quality of the performance. The Masters expressed disappointment in Ji-yoon, and that and her mistakes probably led to her elimination. Shana is called out as one of the best vocalists and gets a nice end to her arc as she said she is satisfied, which is nice. Moving on to the next performance, My House. Youngin is of course the main character, and this team seems to have more issues than most with language barriers. And in typical Mnet fashion, of course, Youngin is the hero while the Chinese member Yale is the villain. The hesitation when talking about why she was the leader and a good leader makes us think that she wasn't, and that she became the leader for bad reasons, especially when we get flashbacks to her not listening to Youngin's suggestions and when she makes mistakes. This is directly contrasted with Youngin, whose vocals are praised. And of course, Youngin is ranked highest in interims while Yale is ranked lowest. Mnet often has the highest and lowest members from the same team just to create drama and contrast so they can highlight trainees they like. But this is an interesting one. The sadness that Yale expresses makes us hope she will do better, and this is shown in the next scene since she keeps practicing, with of course the inspirational music to make us feel her motivation. And Youngin comforts her, which makes Youngin seem like a kind and gracious person, even more good qualities for an idol. The actual performance has lots of great reaction shots, especially from Jia, which further binds her and Youngin together in our minds and makes us want to vote for both of them. Youngin's outfit far outshines the other two members, probably because she had the killing part, but it still helps her stand out even more, and automatically draws attention to her, which will, in turn, probably lead to her getting more votes. But unfortunately, this is yet another performance on this show in which minors are shown to be sensual and possibly even sexy, so I can't bring myself to actually watch this performance or show much of it. It just makes me uncomfortable. In the evaluation, of course, Youngin gets praise and flashbacks to highlight her skills. The other two members also get praised, but Yale mentioning Youngin brings everything back to her, of course. Next we move on to Salute, which has an infamous place in lots of people's hearts in regards to its editing. This is kind of a Chaibing versus the Korean member's performance. Of course, since as a Chinese person, Chaibing must be evil, right Mnet? This starts with the battle for killing parts with Chaibing and Jia, and then in the interims we get the infamous Chaibing evil edit. This edit has been proven to be spliced together from various scenes and times, and thus made it seem like people said stuff they probably didn't say, and like they gave Chaibing nasty looks that they may well not have given her. It also apparently used some mistranslations to English that theoretically had the same meaning, but which used a different wording to make Chai-Bing seem more arrogant. There is a video that highlights a lot of the wacky stuff here, and which points out how you can see which shots came from which scene, which I will link in the source document in the description. Another thing I want to note here is that this edit makes it seem like Dion gave Chai-Bing a suspicious look and rolled her eyes at her. And yes, Dion is the hero in this scene compared to Chai-Bing, but I'm still seriously confused why no one attacked Dion for this. She looked seriously dismissive and even arrogant herself. Chai-Bing gets lots of criticism in this performance, and the sound does a lot of work for her, such as the emphasis of squeaking shoe sounds, which makes the performance seem awkward. Even after the suggestion to change the killing part, and after Chai-Bing says she is happy for someone else to do it, she has editing moments showing she is resisting change, which makes her seem arrogant, hypocritical, and selfish, like she's making excuses for her bad behaviour. The other members explicitly compare her unfavourably to Dion, which may or may not have been staged, but which was definitely included by Mnet to draw further comparisons between them, where Dion was, of course, coming out on top. Thus we move on to more and more practice where Chai-Bing doesn't want to do what was previously decided, and which makes her seem like she was abusing her power. Doa being upset here and expressing this in her confessionals makes her seem like a far better and more level-headed leader than Chai-Bing. And since Doa was a decently well-known trainee, this gives authority to her words, which tear down Chai-Bing even more. In the rehearsal, Chai-Bing is literally the only one who is criticised, and zooms on all of the others avoiding her gaze makes us feel that they all hate her or are scared of her. She is literally painted as the one who will decide if they win versus ice cream or not. Interestingly, although most people seem to think this was an evil edit of Chai-Bing and paints Doa as a more responsible person, some people, namely OT8 Reddit mod Irene Promoter, seem to feel that this was an evil edit of Doa too, saying that it painted her like she was stabbing Chai-Bing in the back by exposing her behaviour to the confessional, and I just don't think so. I mean, to begin with, Irene Promoter seems intent on Doa being the single biggest victim of Girls Planet, so it could well be confirmation bias, but also I just don't think there was anything negative about this here. We've had stabbing someone in the back edits on this show before, namely Yu Dion in The Eve exposing her team's part distribution to the Masters, but this was edited in a very different way to how Doa was edited. In Yu Dion's edit, we had a lot of close-ups on her face and her nervous eyes, and of course lots of tense music and zooms in comparison to her teammates who were shown to be skilled and humble. But we don't get any of that here. Doa isn't given any weird edit that paints her in a less favourable way, certainly not in comparison to Chai-Bing. If Doa was given an evil edit of some description, we would expect her to be painted as worse than Gia, since evil edits almost always have someone who the evil edited person needs to be compared to, otherwise we don't have a benchmark and the edit just kind of falls flat. But Doa isn't negatively compared to anyone. In fact, she is positively compared to Chai-Bing. She's not given an angel edit, she's not highlighted as incredibly skilled or having a great personality above all others, but she is edited in a relatively neutral way, which by comparison makes her seem far better than Chai-Bing. I certainly didn't get the impression that she was stabbing Chai-Bing in the back, she was just expressing her frustrations at how she was leading the group. And I think many other people got this impression as well. In comparison to Chai-Bing, Doa definitely wasn't evil edited here, and the comparison matters far more to impact audience impressions than the actual editing itself does. At the end of the day, my verdict is, this isn't an evil edit. Anyway, the performance. Gia is highlighted as always as very cool, and Dion gets a reaction saying that she's scared, and if the god of ice cream team, Kim Dion, is scared by your performance, you know it's a good performance. At the end, Gia is of course complimented, as is the group in general, although Gia really is the only one highlighted, possibly in a last-minute attempt to get her through to the next round. And finally we move on to Fate, where we get another flashback to the interim check, since we might have forgotten the harshness of all of their feedback from the last episode in the days and hours since we last saw them, apparently. The flashback is good. It shows the mentors actually mentoring, and it shows the hardworking and skilled nature of the group. It also gives us some funny moments, like the suggestion of Yeso dying and the Wild West music following this, along with everyone else looking horrified. Like, no way, our Maknae's going to die? Hence we get a lot more of them throwing out ideas and practicing hard before we're finally onto the performance. I genuinely have never watched this full performance before I watched the show, since I always thought Yeso was overacting, and it was a perfectly fine performance. But the masters and other trainees look like they're going to cry right from the start, and their stunned, depressed final reactions to the performance, where no one can even clap, makes this performance seem far better. It also gets the nice addition of a wind machine, which adds drama to the performance and would have heightened its emotional effectiveness. Thus they get lots of praise, and Yeso cries, which humanises her and shows how hard she worked. She gets lots and lots and lots of praise and continues to be the main character, of course. Finally, to end this episode, we get to the announcement of the results for each competition, at which I find it hilarious that people are still acting surprised when they find out about the benefits, even though they've literally already been told what they are. Surely this surprise is staged. Jingu is, as usual, being annoying by taking forever to announce things, and I think it's funny that for this one we have shots of the trainees being annoyed with him too, since they usually don't show that. Of course, Mafia in the Morning wins for the 3-member teams. I say of course, since based on how the 3-member teams were edited, the winner really should have been Mafia in the Morning. Or perhaps We Are if they got lucky. Fate won for 6-member teams with a 95 out of 100 score, which of course gets lots of people wowed, and which was also expected since they were also edited to be the best team. Everyone in the team looks pleasantly surprised, especially Yujin, which will of course make her fans happy. There is apparently a tiny difference in scores between the two 9-member teams, which of course will make us, the audience, super curious. Salute wins, which I was genuinely surprised about considering the editing, but I guess this gives Dion even more of an underdog arc and more highlights in the future. This is clearly Mnet's plan, since instead of highlighting Salute team's reaction to their win, we get a shot of Dion's disappointed face. Chaibing gets to give a speech, which I'm surprised about, even though she is the leader of the team. It was a decent speech, and I'm kind of surprised that Mnet showed this without further evil editing her. Interestingly, based on what the Masters said earlier, this win for Salute team suggests that Chaibing did a good enough job for the team to win, even though she was never praised for the performance and this was never mentioned. And with that, that's the end of the episode, and we will all tune in next week for the second eliminations. This is another elimination episode, so even though I won't mention it all the time, you can expect lots of dramatic zooms, lots of trainees speculating about who will be called next, lots of tense music, and tons and tons and tons of Jingu just dramatically pausing and taking forever to announce things. The Planet Pass is of course hyped up, and we get a highlight of the Dion Chaibing drama too. I find it really weird that the subtitles here say that the trainees are at the crossroads of elimination and survival, because crossroads makes it sound like a choice, and they don't have a choice. We also get a teaser of K-Group being in really low positions, which makes us want to keep watching to find out, and which makes us worried because the K-Group are the protagonists of the show. But before we get to the eliminations, we have the customary announcement of the third mission, with 4 new songs which girls will be sorted into by fans, based on which song they suit the best. I also really liked the segment where they introduced the producers for each song. I thought it was really fun, and I learned some new things about the songs. And of course, the songs and the benefit are hyped up, especially Snake, which had a good chunk of the final 18 in it, I think, and which had a lot of popular trainees expressing their love for it. Then we get the more light-hearted sorting of people into songs, where we get the typically goofy things like groups doing other songs and people being happy when skilled trainees join their groups. These don't do tons editing-wise, but it's always nice to give people more screen time, and it's good for the votes people get if they have lots of casual screen time. For instance, Youngin had tons of reaction shots on Girls Planet, which probably meant she had become relatively well known, and this would have led more people to vote for her. This also lets Mnet highlight trainees they want through showing how much other trainees want them, like Hikaru being wanted for Snake Team. This is also used to highlight Mashiro, and especially Yujin, who has half of Shoot Team running over to her in joy when she enters. Then we get some small segments for each team, which will help us be invested in the story of each team and watch the next episode, but which also pads out this episode so we have longer to wait before the eliminations, and that of course gets Mnet more screen time. U+Me has highlights for G1 with a last chance edit, and for Doa, who is picked for the first killing part and is complimented. Snake have an interesting edit. Dion and Chaibing are both in this group, so of course Mnet gets to continue to evil edit or otherwise put down Chaibing in order to bring Dion up. This starts with a leadership rivalry between them and the contrast between flashbacks to Dion's amazing leadership edit last mission and Chaibing's awkward face. Although Dion mentions her confidence, she also withdraws, which shows her to be humble in comparison to Chaibing, who last mission was portrayed as very arrogant. And the other members don't look happy with this situation. Many of them speak up against Chaibing. In the end, they choose to see who can lead the team the best, and the fact that Chaibing refers to Dion in this makes Dion seem more confident and competent. Although people have pointed out Chaibing was probably just worried after seeing how she was edited last time, so goodness knows. Anyway, the combination of this drama and having Dion on the team means that Snake Team get by far the most screen time in this segment. Next we get to Shoot Team, who have a lack of confidence in their leadership skills, but everyone is very happy when Yujin steps up, and this makes her seem humble and also willing to step up for the good of her team. This is the same situation they have with the main vocal position, so she steps up again and gets some goofy sound effects when trying to get people to volunteer for positions. This is great for her image since it shows how desperately she wants to help her team, and the fact that this was followed up by compliments from the masters is even better. We see her strength of character as she works to improve and works with the other members. She, of course, continues to be the main character for the team and just shows her stellar personality. I think her past Idol experience was really good for her on this show. She was far more emotionally stable than many who had less experience, and this let her be a great mentor for the other trainees. Fun fact, Hui performed a similar role on Boys Planet. In Utopia, Bora is, as expected, the leader, and several members get compliments, although Yeyoung makes several mistakes which are highlighted. Bora helps the others and shows her commitment to the team, which is a great look for her, especially with this consistently good attitude she has throughout the show. But Utopia team isn't nearly as interesting as Snake, so we're back to Snake and their leadership debate. Chaibing seems to be having language barrier issues, while Dion's team continue to practice in the background, which highlights the struggles of Chaibing's team and thus paints her as incompetent. Even though both teams probably practiced well at times and had issues at others, Mnet only ever shows us clips of Chaibing's group being in a rut and Dion's team working well, so we get the impression that Dion is a far better leader. In addition, we can't see Chaibing's face a lot, which dehumanizes her and distracts from her emotions. Mnet adds to all of this tension with dramatic battle music, and members of Chaibing's group looking distracted or annoyed, and Chaibing's sigh, which could have been for any number of reasons, is combined with zooms of member reactions so she looks irrationally angry. Of course, this is contrasted with Dion's team working well. She organises formations well, says she will listen to the members, and so on. She is paired with popular members like Ruchi, which would give her prestige by association, and the members of her group compliment her, especially people like Hikaru, who is another popular trainee. Dion looks happy while Chaibing looks like she's on the verge of tears. I kid you not, everything in this segment is purposefully chosen to juxtapose the two and make Dion come out on top. Clearly seeing all of this, Chaibing gives the leader position to Dion, which I do think was a good decision for her image, but was probably too little too late. And this leads to more Dion praise, Dion being shocked and Dion thus seeming humble. It's so blatant. The way they've edited everything together is insane levels of Dion favoritism. On an unrelated note, Tammy's ponytail reminds me of Seijin from Superkind. Rip Superkind. I'll make a video on you one day. Then we have the typical segment of everyone getting worried the night before the eliminations, with calming music which helps give us an even harsher jolt into stress when the eliminations start, and so on. The subtitle, "They don't know what will happen but they do their best," reiterates the trainees' purity, and how everything is in the audience's hands. Classic Mnet glorifying the audience to keep them watching. and product placement as always. Then we get onto the actual eliminations with mandatory sudden noises and lights to give us emotional whiplash, and explicit mention of how few seats there are for survivors to take, which makes people feel bad. Then all of the typical stuff. Cheers for Jingu, a huge number of how many countries voted and how many votes there are, and so on. At rank 7 we have Yunning for C group, probably dropping as a result of her evil editing, but showing cuteness and charisma at her placement. J group is Ran, showing the power of the planet pass. K group is Bora, who is as always humble and loved by everyone. Rank 6 is Xinwei for the C group, Rurika for J group, and Maya for K group. Maya has a cute little edit, and her mentioning Dion positively makes us want to root for Dion, since we of course want cute baby Maya to be happy. Rank 5 we have Manami for J group, which makes sense since she got cute edits with Wonjae and Bora. I'm genuinely surprised that Manami on the beat didn't become a catchphrase for her like Ricky's young and rich, tall and handsome. Having a catchphrase could well have propelled her to the finale, since there is a pattern of trainees with fun catchphrases doing very well on Mnet shows. This also lets Mnet give us a fun contrast between Manami being cool-headed and Wonjae freaking out at each of the clues before Manami is announced. I don't think Mnet necessarily wanted Wonjae in the final group, but they definitely wanted her to continue on, and they probably would have been fine with her getting in. She would have been a great variety show idol. Our rank 5 for K group is Youngin, and everyone running to congratulate and hug her shows how much the other contestants loved her. I find it interesting that this girl mentioned that someone from Salute Team had to survive. I imagine that Mnet kept it there for foreshadowing reasons, and also for the drama. Salute Team won, but all of them other than Chaibing got eliminated, while most of Ice Cream Team survived despite losing the battle. Our rank 5 from C group is Wonjae, whose reaction was amazing. For rank 4 we have Chaibing from C group, making her, as I said, the only member of Salute Team to survive. This also confuses the contestants, since Dion used to be ranked low and Chaibing was ranked high, and now it's the opposite, and this just shows the power of Mnet's editing. J group is Shana and K group is Yeso. At this point Mnet highlights Dion's hopeless face, probably because Dion knew that she was ranked 9 last time, and her confidence has been crushed time and time again on the show. This face of hers and Mnet showing it adds to her underdog arc, especially since she says there's no way she makes it in, and since everyone else is talking about how much they want her to get in and how much they like her. Seriously, Ice Cream Dion is the angel edit of all angel edits. Then we get our first place candidates announced for each group, starting with Mashiro, Hikaru and Yurina from J group. I'm not quite sure why Hikaru was so surprised that she was a candidate, like she was JO1, so it makes sense she would rank high. Was there something behind the scenes that made her anxious? Was No Excuses and the criticism she got during that mission so bad for her confidence? Anyway, Hikaru is rank 3, Mashiro is rank 2, and Yurina is rank 1, which didn't surprise many people. I like how, having been announced that they will survive, Mashiro and Yurina don't care that much about whether they're rank 1 or 2, and thus just smile at each other. It's a nice moment during a stressful episode, and that's probably why Mnet kept it in. It also ironically shows yet again my point about how there's no difference between the ranks as long as you survive. Anyway, Yurina's a really interesting personality on a survival show, I think. I haven't seen anyone who embodies the quiet, shy and pretty bookworm type as much as her, and her styling on the show ran with this, focusing on her being pretty and often quite conservative. I'm quite surprised, yet again, she didn't make it into the group, but I guess she just wasn't an exciting enough personality to make people really want to vote for her, aka she wasn't interesting enough to have a large one pick. Next, for C group, we have Xiaoting, Ruchi and Jing Chao, the latter of whom definitely didn't expect to be called up. They are all highlighted as being very pretty, which is probably one of the big reasons Jing Chao got so far. Rank 3 is Jing Chao, rank 2 is Ruchi, and rank 1 is Xiaoting, as we all expected. Next we have K group, where lots of people seem to think that Bahie will get in. The fact that she isn't in the top 3, even though everyone thinks she will be, shows yet again how the power of international fan bases can create issues on these shows. We saw this on Island 2, where Ling Ling didn't get to part 2 despite having a strong One Peak international fanbase. The fact that neither Ling Ling nor Bahie were filler picks for a lot of people, and that both of them had large international fan bases rather than Korean ones and international votes are weighted lower, shows the massive effect filler votes and Korean fan bases can have. Fun fact. Anyway, our 3 K-group candidates are Dayeon, Chaehyun and Yoojin. For some reason this makes Dayeon look even more sad, although she does seem to be less tense. Possibly because she thinks her hopes are being brought up for nothing. I feel that the strength of emotion Dayeon seems to feel when she is called, and all of the other girls crying for her, shows how important this is for her. Dayeon is rank 3, which was probably the best option for her since it lets her grow more and go higher, and continues the underdog arc for a few more episodes. Rank 2 is Chaehyun and rank 1 is Yoojin, both expected results which show how much Yoojin is loved and which shows Chaehyun's rise to the top. Next we get to the dramatic rank 8 announcement. I would give a lot to know who everyone was praying for during this segment, and to know by proxy whose prayers were fulfilled and whose weren't. Our J candidates are Kotane and Mei, and our rank 8 is Mei as expected. This segment had some odd editing that made it seem like Mnet wanted more people to vote for Kotane, even though the votes had already been cast. It's also really weird for them to say Mei can continue to pursue her dream as rank 8, which really emphasises the power the audience has and which shows how easily Mnet will throw away people's dreams, blood, sweat and tears just for views. It also makes it seem like we're allowing Mei to continue, as if eliminated girls aren't allowed to continue, and as if Mei's hard work isn't enough on its own or isn't worth anything. Let's just say I find this subtitle weird all around. Mind you, the editing of the whole rank 8 segment was also bizarre all round, so yeah, I'll talk more about that later. Next we get to the C group candidates, Ziyin and Ling Zhao. The eventual rank 8 is Ziyin, who looks happy but also kind of out of it. Since we know that she left the show for health reasons, this makes me wonder if she was already sick at this point. But either way, it's nice to see how Zhao was happy for her, and presumably happy that she herself had made it so far. Next we get to the K-group announcement, definitely the most controversial one here. Why is that? Well, our 2 candidates are Doa and Bahie, and in the end, even with her salute benefit, Doa lost, and Bahie came out on top. And this is even weirder editing-wise, because the editing of this segment is so ambiguous that you can read it in tons of different ways. For instance, there's this moment where Bahie is kind of giggling and rolling her eyes, which you could read in a positive way as her trying not to cry, or in a negative way as her being arrogant. And this is contrasted with Doa's dramatic and surprised reaction. Either way, everyone seems happy to have Bahie, and I don't think that she herself expected this. Bahie, like Ziyin, looks resigned to her fate when she's announced as rank 8, and in more wacko editing, everyone being shocked here is very ambiguous. Are they happy and relieved, or upset? Showing Dayeon here, who is Bahie's teammate and the favourite of the show, also subconsciously props Bahie up, since she gets to be associated with Dayeon. In fact, Bahie had tons of good associations with popular trainees over the course of the show, with Maya, Dayeon, Ran, Yoojin and more. Even more editing, with this weird subtitle, "Everyone's surprised," and this one girl saying "that's fortunate" with a blank face. This could be a "good for her that she has a popular brother," or a "I'm glad she made it." There's also odd ominous music, which again could be seen as either Bahie being a villain or sadness at Doa's elimination. I think at this point Bahie was starting to get sick of this show and less confident, which makes sense since the competition was getting tougher and tougher and she was getting more and more hate with every elimination round she survived. She looks depressed, she avoids big positions, and so on. And this is reflected in this one girl saying "be confident" while she's giving her speech. And now we get, guess what, more weird editing. In this segment, despite editing Bahie in a very weird way, Mnet gives Doha a super sympathetic edit. Sad music, showing everyone else crying, saying that she needs to leave the show, and emphasizing the effort she went through to get on another survival show. And this is really weird. They make it seem like Doa is an angel on earth and everyone loves her, and this makes it seem like Mnet was super sad about her being eliminated, but Mnet never particularly indicated that they wanted Doa in the group. In fact, she and Bahie had very similar edits. Both were almost invisible, used in confessionals to give clout to other contestants, and otherwise edited in a very slightly positive but mostly neutral way. So my only guess here is that Mnet wanted more emotion in this episode, and Doa was a good person to use for that. The same way they used Hui for emotion in Boys Planet and Jimin in Island 2. Bahie gave such a safe speech that elicited very few emotions in the audience, and half of the point of elimination episodes is to make us feel sad and anxious. So in steps Doa and her dramatic editing. This scene also bothers me because it manipulates Doa, but also because it is used by Doa stans, especially Irene Promoter, to show supposedly how Mnet and the other trainees on the show wanted Doa to continue and didn't want or like Bahie. And this just isn't true, for multiple reasons. To start with, lots of people seem happy to have Bahie. Second, a lot of this editing is very neutral. Other than Doa having a sob story, neither she or Bahie are edited throughout the show in a particularly positive or negative way, showing that Mnet was likely relatively neutral towards both of them, and that both played it safe enough to not be evil edited. If Mnet liked Doa so much, they would have given her far more of a positive edit. And speaking of, if Mnet liked Doa so much, and if she really was as amazing of a performer as Irene Promoter feels she is, the potential it girl of 4th gen and the final centre of the group, why didn't she get picked for the Planet Pass, and why didn't she get more votes? At the end of the day, Doa just clearly wasn't liked enough and popular enough to get enough votes to get her through. I find a lot of the things Healites say annoying, but one of the things that they do say correctly is that no one really has the right to complain about Bahie making it into Kepler over their faves, when they could have just voted harder for their faves. This definitely applies to this situation. If Doa was so loved, especially by the Korean viewers of the show, why didn't she get enough votes? And why didn't people vote harder for her? The only way to secure your faves debut is to be dedicated in voting for them and them only. And this is a lesson that girl group fans just haven't learnt apparently, considering the same issue happened in Island 2, but didn't happen in Boys Planet. So yeah, Doa just wasn't popular enough to get enough votes, and she clearly wasn't liked enough by Mnet for them to give her the Planet Pass. That doesn't mean anything bad about her, but it does mean that OT8s, and specifically Irene Promoter, should stop making Doa the victim in the situation. I also find it very funny how if Bahie had been given the Planet Pass for any reason, the OT8s would have rioted. Would she have been given it? Probably not, unless Mnet wanted to keep using her for clout, but it would have been funny to see. Alright, moving on from that to the announcement of the top 9, which is, as always, unnecessarily dramatic and which has reduced stakes compared to Boys Planet, since everyone already knew that they had survived. That's probably why they changed it to be more dramatic in Boys Planet. P9 is Chaehyun, who gives a great speech, cutely applauds herself for her hard work, and seems to be shaking a bit, possibly from nerves. P8 is Chaibing, who shows the grip Chinese trainees had on the competition at this time, considering she was CO4 and Chaehyun was only KO2. I think she knew that she would be out in the next round since she seems a little bit down. P7 is Jing Chao, and I don't have much to say about her. P6 is Ruchi, who gives a nice speech. P5 is Yujin. Everyone being surprised about this is reinforced through the lack of music and the use of dramatic zooms. She gave a nice speech speculating about why people voted for her, which is really unique on survival shows. And I do think her speculation of because she enjoys being on stage is very true. It's one of the reasons I like her so much, and I'm sure the same applies for lots of her fans. This also probably made Mnet anxious and affected the other trainees, since rank 1 of the K group was lower than rank 3 of J group. This probably also showed how international trainees tended to be filler votes. P4 is Hikaru. I found it interesting that she was first in Egypt, but to be fair, there were probably only a few thousand voters in Egypt. I like how Maya makes a pyramid shape with her hands to represent Egypt, and Shana saying that she is mature is a good look for her. P3 is Mashiro, who has a humble speech and seems on the verge of tears. Xiaoting and Yurina are first place candidates again, and we get lots and lots of comments on how pretty they are. I found the idea that they were first in 61 countries and 41 respectively interesting, since their ranks dropped massively in the finale. But I guess that's just the power of filler votes. I also felt that this really was Gaze Planet Season 1, especially with Urina's speech, all the hand-holding and the super dramatic music. Anyway, in the end, Urina was P2 and Xiaoting was P1, and the edit of them smiling at each other as they give their speeches is good to develop their relationship and will encourage fans to vote for both of them, which is good because Mnet probably wanted both of them. And the idolization of P1 on this show is yet again insane. Just had to mention it again. One of the few good things Island 2 did is that it didn't idolize rank 1. I mean, as I've said before, whether you rank 1st or 9th on this show, you debut either way, and since they aren't treating rank 1 as the center anymore, or at least they didn't on Girls Planet, you don't even have the incentive of being the center. And then we move on to what is probably the most dramatic part of these episodes, the Planet Pass. Kotone is called from J Group, and we get a nice tension break with Jingu giving her a tissue, which leads into callbacks to him giving Wonjae a tissue. This makes me wonder whether he just has a box of tissues behind his podium, and if so, what decides whether he gives someone one? Does he only give them to people Mnet likes? Is it to avoid people getting their makeup ruined? Is it so their crying can be even more dramatic? Is he just in charge of the tissues? Anyway, Maya says that Kotone was packing, and this, combined with her praying and her huge number of tears, paints her in a very good light, and elicits sympathy from the audience and a sense of drama, since we could see how hopeless she was. Next is Jinyu from C Group. Nothing super exciting to mention about her. Next is K Group, and of course the skill of K Group is emphasized through Mnet showing the many amazing candidates for the Planet Pass that there are. Yet again, this makes me wonder why Doa didn't get the Planet Pass if she really was the most talented potential it girl to ever exist. I in no way want to downplay her talents. She is super talented and really deserved to be in Kepler. But some OT8s talk about her like she's an actual goddess and the single best person on the show who should have been rank 1, and just no. Mnet would never have pushed her enough for that, and you can see it through her not getting the Planet Pass. Anyway, I like Dion's face here. She looks a bit like a shark. Shana talking about Suyeon is also cute. Anyway, this segment was blatantly drawn out, as you could expect, with Jingu just saying Kim. And all of the trainees were pissed, especially Suyeon, who looked like she wanted to kill someone, which is fair. I wanted to kill someone too. There was seriously no need to drag it out this much. Anyway, the Planet Pass is announced to be Suyeon, which is very well deserved, and which everyone seems to be very happy about. The mentors point to her versatility, which I definitely think is one of her huge selling points. Actually, maybe it was good that this was dragged out, because by this point Kotone had calmed down enough that she could actually give a speech. And so we get Jingu stressing yet again the lack of a group ratio in the final group, making me shocked yet again that people managed to think it would be 3-3-3 all the time. I'm also shocked that the trainees are so shocked that the next elimination round lets so few people through. Like, you know the final group is only 9 people, so why is this so surprising? Then, of course, we get the general mixed reactions to the elimination announcement, the sad music as the eliminated girls leave, and the stressful and dramatic teaser for the next episode. But we also get something horrific, the notice that the Queen, Zian, has left the show. I was pretty devastated when I found out, even though it was 3 years ago, and even if she had stayed, she almost certainly wouldn't have made it to the final group, although I do like to believe she would have done pretty well. I've listened to a bunch of Zian's solo music, and although it's not really my style, there are several songs I like, so let me play a short segment. Anyway, I wish her the best in the future and hope she was able to recover quickly after leaving the show. It seems like she's since acted in a few dramas, and she posts often on her personal Instagram, including K-pop covers. This is needlessly dramatic right from the start. If someone can't get a part, they get shoved from the team, which could either make or break their chance of debut. For a certain Suyeon, I would say make, by 1 rank off. Spoilers for a 4-year-old show, I guess. Let's start with U plus Me team. They're very sad with so few people left, and the mention of how Mashiro could have been the only person left is even sadder. But they do get the good news that they'll get more members. As a side note, I love how you can see acne on some of the girls here. It's very humanizing, and even though they've tried to hide it, it makes sense. They're living in stressful and hard conditions, and even if they weren't, they're still human. May's statement that all of the teams are facing issues is the perfect transition Mnet needs to lead into Snake Team, who have the opposite problem of U plus Me team. They have too many people. Hence, they all look nervous. Even better, this allows Mnet to begin an amazing arc for Suyeon. Spoilers, I guess, as she goes from being an insecure Planet Pass person to being even more insecure as she's kicked out of her team, to being raised to being the killing part for U plus Me, and then winning the round with her new team and being praised. Everything in this scene creates tension. Dramatic music while Dion sorts out parts, a lack of music while everyone auditions so we can hear every slight clothing or foot sound, the teaser from the previous episode which suggested that Suyeon would get kicked out, shots of Suyeon getting more and more frustrated as the stakes get higher, etc, etc. But Snake Team, as we saw in previous episodes, is full of drama even without Suyeon. Ruchi talks about her voice being in bad condition, and Youngin criticizes this, which, with how tense the edit makes it, could set either of them up for an evil edit. Of course, we know Mnet are xenophobic and want Youngin out of the group, but that's a different matter. Or is it? Either way, Youngin confidently says she suits the song better, and of course we get a cliffhanger. We move on to Utopia team, who, since Queen Ziyin left the show, have to kick someone out. There's a massive contrast between Yeso being excited and the others being anxious. Cue the tense music and the confessionals, where Yeso gets to showcase her good common sense again by saying that she wants to stay. But unlike other trainees, it's not because she thinks she suits the song or because she likes the song or doesn't like another one, but instead it's because the Planet Guardians picked Utopia for her, which would have won over hearts and is a very smart thing to say. Shana's increased confidence is shown, which is great to see, and although it's annoying that Bora takes her time announcing the votes, she has a sweet smile so we know she's not being mean about it. Yeso gets the killing part and Bora gets the main vocal by default, which is expected. I found the subtitles saying that Shana sincerely congratulated Chaehyun for getting vocal 1 interesting, since they show how much the subs can manipulate our perspective of what's happening. I mean, we can never know if she was actually and genuinely sincere, but Mnet have no desire to paint her in a poor light. Jing Chao crying compared to Shana singing happily creates a sense of tension, and also nicely gives a chance for Bora to show her leadership skills again, although this does lead into Jing Chao getting pity votes. Even though she points them out herself, the audience still may see this poorly. Another editing loss for Chinese trainees on the show. Then we switch to U plus Me team, which is fitting since we've seen Snake and Utopia have to sacrifice members to them. It's far more dramatic to see the new trainees enter the new room rather than leave the old one, and gives a nice opportunity for comic relief when the director enters the room instead of an actual trainee. Of course, U plus Me are happy to have Youngin, with mandatory flashbacks to Snake Team where we're reminded of Ruchi's supposed manipulation, which creates a nice base for Youngin to be spiteful. I personally laughed really hard when I saw the contrast between Youngin crying and Mashiro instantly offering her the main vocal for U plus Me. It was great, especially with the hindsight I have now of knowing that U plus Me team actually won, so Youngin did get her revenge. The next member is Suyeon. As we know, she'll do the killing part and also get her revenge. Finally, Shana, who sadly says that she's lost her confidence again and who also gets to beat her previous team with revenge. Very poetic. Hence, Suyeon's amazing arc. She gets the killing part, and I find it interesting that she 1, thinks she did poorly in the last mission, and 2, thinks she doesn't suit U plus Me. I guess even she is unaware of her own versatility. I always find it interesting how the show shows the timeline of auditioning for the killing part. Based on the pacing of this episode, it seems like the new trainees walked in 5 seconds ago and suddenly know the choreography and parts, but we know that they must have practiced at least a little bit. Moving on to our 4th team, finally, Shoot. I find the structure of this really interesting. The show shows U plus Me team to set up the dilemma of needing to switch teams, then shows Snake team to give us Suyeon's arc and the cliffhanger of Ruchi versus Youngin, Then shows Utopia, the other team who has to kick a member out before we go back to U plus me, showing the result of the kicking. Shoot only just comes in at this point because 1, they have some popular trainees that Mnet knows we'll be keeping an eye out for, and 2, they're not at all relevant to the U plus me storyline, since, as we find out, and nicely coincidentally, all of the remaining members fill the parts of the song perfectly, a fact which Bahie points out. Combined with other shots and other footage we see of her on the show, I think she was very much a quietly analytical type of person. Eugen's excitement at not having to change the parts is also wonderful and shows how she brought a lot of support and joy to the other trainees. It also showcases her bright personality and image well. This episode, interestingly, is where Bahie, as part of Shoot Team, gets a mini angel edit with Eugen, which, honestly, if her debut wasn't already secured from her crying earlier and being in Fiesta and Ice Cream, this may well have done it. The two of them also get the most screen time in this team, which makes sense since they were the ones with probably the biggest fan bases. Then we get to the dreaded day out. Oh dear. There were definitely some interesting comments made here, such as the suggestion of busking followed by the insistence that the girls aren't starving. I mean, I would hope they're not starving, but I kind of don't believe them with how Mnet was running things. Mind you, Tammy did later say that some people just stress ate the entire time, so they must have had decent access to food. So first we follow Shoot Team as they end up, well, you know where they end up, at Dion's house of all places. I mentioned at the end of the last episode that Dion was almost eliminated in the second round, and that showed her at rank 9, one below the cutoff for rank 8, and this riggery made people vote for her and get her back in the top 8, but as I said in that episode, I do wonder, had Dion been eliminated, what would have happened to this segment at her house? Would it just have happened anyway and been a memorial to a lost trainee? Like, how would Mnet justify it? It was flimsy enough of a justification as it was. Considering the trainees all surely talked about their experiences with each other after that day, I wonder how the people who went to Dion's house felt about that being their experience compared to the other groups. Anyway, what was the point of all of this? Well, it was obviously blatant favouritism and to give Dion clout and screen time. We are almost always focused on Eugen and Bahie, the two most popular members of Shoot, and Dion's mum calling Bahie here suggests that she knows them well. Another benefit of sending Shoot Team to Dion's house, outside of Eugen and Bahie being popular, is that most of Shoot Team were in the Ice Cream team, hence they get to continue the praise of Dion from that mission. The whole thing is, as I'm sure we all know, Dion praise, advertisement, and propaganda. Dion's house, Dion's childhood photos and bedroom, Dion's parents' sushi restaurant, writing notes to Dion praise, everything. Bahie even says that she wants to be like Dion. This is used to transition to Dion's team, and considering Shoot Team being in her house and the video call they have with Snake, this episode was well and truly a Dion episode. She was probably mentioned on screen or otherwise salient for over half of it, for a single person. And it gets worse, but we'll get to that later. For now, we're focused on Snake Team, who get some funky country music. This show even turned out to be a bit educational. I learned about butt chairs. They sound like a great invention, and I have no doubt that racism is one of the reasons they haven't made it big in the West. The point of this section with Snake is to be goofy in everything that happens, although of course Mnet missed the mark. For instance, the team suggests that Hikaru gets constipation, which is framed in a funny way, but not only is this a weirdly private thing for Mnet to be including, I'm also not surprised that she'd get constipation with how they've been treated. Another example, the tension of potatoes being chosen with tense music and flashbacks to the elimination. This is supposed to be funny. The potatoes need to worry about being eliminated, but really it just reminds me of how actually traumatizing the eliminations are. Wonjae wins, which is good for her, but I have no clue what she's going to do with so many potatoes. Make a dinner for all of the trainees, maybe? Moving on to U plus me team, who have the more appropriate comedy of chiropractics. Although it's still an odd choice to show this, at least they're actually getting care, you know, and the suffering is in benefit of their health. Then they get a nice dinner, making this by far the best option out of the four in my opinion. Moving on to Utopia team, who get the nice contrast of a nice place with them not wanting to climb the mountain, but at least they have snacks and Bora's leadership. But you know what? We've been away from Dion for too long. So back to Shoot Team, who have to perform in such a small area, Dion's living room. Bahie gives her mum tissues, another thing which 1. Gives Bahie screen time and shows how sweet she is, and 2. Shows a popular trainee getting along with Dion's mum. Hence we get the trainees talking about how much they miss their parents, which of course is directly applied to Dion and leads us into getting even more screen time for her with Snake Team. Wonjae shows her TV skills and personality, and Chaibing is quiet. She knows she's kaput after the past few episodes. Dion's team literally gets a video call from Shoot Team here, and Dion's happiness and emotions are highlighted, even above people like Chaibing, who are literally in a different country from their families. That said, I hope Mnet actually let Dion see her mum after this episode. Utopia Team turned out to be hang gliding, which allows us to see even more of Bora's leadership skills. She speaks multiple languages to help her team. We get happy music and the hang gliding being on Chaehyun's bucket list, contrasted with tense music for Urina and Jing Chao, with the wind making us concerned that they won't be able to participate. And did Mnet potentially endanger the lives of their trainees for this segment? Surely the hang gliding company would have stopped them if it got too bad. On the bright side for the segment, they all made it to the mandatory victorious music, and this is definitely an uplifting segment, and probably the second best of the days out. U plus Me Team are another team who call Snake Team, since we can't go too long without having them on screen. Hence we head back to Shoot Team, who again praise Dion's parents and their sushi, a restaurant which probably got many more customers after this show and episode. On to the actual Dion team, believe it or not. Dion gets more screen time, and there is the awkwardness of them having to perform in front of such a cold audience, which of course is overcome by none other than Dion. If I was one of the old people in this audience, I would have been so confused. In U plus Me, we see Mashiro struggling to go up, since she's scared of heights, which is used to portray her as a sweet leader but really is just a bit mean on Mnet's part. In Snake Team, Chaibing finally speaks to praise Dion. I'm sure at least some of what she said is genuine, and I do believe that they became friends, but I wonder if she also did this as a last-ditch effort to try and save her image on the show, knowing that by associating herself with Dion and praising her, people might see her in a better light. Utopia Team finish up their day by talking about how great their day was and how much they like each other. U plus Me shows confidence and determination, and Shoot talk about how much they feel at home in Dion's house, making them literally the only team who didn't talk about themselves and whose experience didn't give them any, actual experience. Then we get to the interim rankings, where Jingu is hilariously 5 times larger than the girls, and where it isn't live, which is interesting. Everyone seems stressed, and honestly, I would be stressed too. Whoever said they were going to have a mental breakdown here is completely justified with how traumatizing these survival shows are. Anyway, the interim ranks. Shinwei at 18, Manami at 17, Ran at 16, Jing Chao at 15, shown to be in danger since she dropped so much. Wonji at 14, shown to have a stable rank after the planet pass. Bahie at 13, Youngin at 12, Yeso at 11, Yanning delighted with 10th, and hence we move to the top 9, which obviously causes stress on these shows, since it's starting to come to an end and the rankings are changing. This is also the start of the true stress for Chaibing. Shana is rank 9, Chaehyun is 8, and this is where others also start getting stressed for Chaibing. Ruchi is 7th, Yujin is 6th, which unfortunately makes her and others stressed. 5th is Urina, another person who dropped, and while other people are shocked, Yeso congratulates her, which is always a good look. Mashiro is 4th, and hence we get even more mention of Dion, which makes it clear that Dion thought she went really far down. May I remind you that Dion's confidence was seemingly destroyed with everything the show has put her through? Hikaru is 3rd and seems happy, Dion is 2nd, which shocks her, and Xiaoting is unsurprisingly 1st. People like Mei are stressed since they dropped, and Chaibing is determined not to cry, which makes sense. but this is a sad end to the episode and will make everyone hypervote for their picks, shown through how different the final elimination ranks were. At the end of this episode, we get to the field day, which has some interesting moments like Sunmi falling on the trainees, which would make me die if it happened to me, and Koo-young seeming like a pretty nice person as far as the masters go. Then of course, the mandatory teaser for the next episode, including the Avengers Snake team being criticised. The comic relief section for this episode will clearly be the fan meeting, which I thought was very interestingly done since it was in the middle of COVID. A drive-through fan meeting would have been the most unique and weirdest fan meeting ever, and I would really like to hear from some of the people who went to it to hear about their experiences. Mashiro gives out pimple patches, which not only makes her look nice, but also humanises the trainees who get pimples, like actual humans, you know? Our MCs are Yeso, Mashiro and Wonjae. Interesting choices, and I don't know how good they are as a trio, but individually I suppose it makes sense. Yeso is their desired maknae and is loved by fans for her pure and sincere image. Mashiro is a good leader and is one of the most popular Japanese trainees, and Wonjae is a well-liked trainee for her variety skills. And here we go, asking Shinwei about Jingu yet again. I'm so sick of this joke. I find it really upsetting that they didn't give the girls a sunshade. They probably got really burned up. I'm also not surprised to see audience members with binoculars, and that was really smart. Here are my highlights from this section. Maya being a baby sleeping in others' rooms and Yujin being her mother. Chaehyun and Bora, who almost sound auto-tuned in sections. Yujin with the helicopter team, of course. It's nice that they all got to perform together, and how we can see 1, how much Yujin likes being on stage, and 2, how much she and Yanning became friends. Dion highlighted for Kick It with Youngin. It's fun, but I'm sad that Gia was replaced. And either way, the editing was so excessive here that I couldn't even see their dance properly. Ice Cream Team with Dion's highlight yet again, and which allows us to see more of the members who didn't get eliminated and initially had quite small parts, like Maya and Bahie. And how you like that team. It was nice to see them come back to these stages, and I was a little bit surprised that they didn't do a similar section in Boys Planet. It was also nice to see everyone happy together. However, the Dion self-deprecating arc continues, and I have no clue why Mashiro didn't realise she had fans when she was voted really high in the show. I guess it can be hard to know when you never meet them in person. Then we get to a mandatory section for these shows, the surprise party the contestants hold for the Masters, who, you know, we need to worship just as much as we worship Rank 1 and the Planet Guardians. The amount of Master worship seriously makes me cringe. Here we get Yeso crying, Sunmi being on the nicer side of the Masters maybe, and Bahie and Bora getting lots of screen time from reaction shots. As much as I do hate the worship of the Masters, I do appreciate the need to humanise them. Jingu especially seems to have at least a bit of self-awareness, which is nice. Alright, back to their training and performances. First, shoot. The highlight for this team is on Yujin, their most popular trainee, who is painted as being burdened, as she is both the leader and the main vocalist and is basically carrying the team. So she gets lots of compliments, which is nice, but really she didn't need those compliments to make it into Kepler. Then we get the Yujin Bahie arc. This makes sense for Mnet to include. It paints both of them in a positive light and associates Yujin with another popular trainee while also making her sympathetic, since she sacrificed so much for the team. It's moments like these that make me think that actually Mnet probably didn't mind if Bahie made the group or not. However, during their interim check it seems like Yujin might be overly confident and the group are criticised. This is something that we see often with groups like these, where there were no changes and everything was easy. They haven't shown any improvement, and they really should have, considering they had it easy. This makes them question Yujin's leadership skills, and the group's vocals especially are criticised. Maya is the main member who gets complimented. This begins an underdog arc for Yujin, which again, may I say, is insane to give her. She's one of the most popular contestants and is skilled and experienced, and yet she keeps getting these underdog stories. Anyway, it kind of backfires for Mnet anyway, since Ruan says the members are the issue, not Yujin, which just reinforces how much she's loved by others. Anyway, Yujin works hard, and the show implies that she improves as a leader through using upbeat music and showing shots of her being a bit stricter, while of course still being nice since, well, she is Yujin after all. Shinwei was criticised and borderline ridiculed during the interim performances, so the fact that we get to see her working so hard with Yujin makes me wonder about Mnet's feelings for her. I feel like she was outside of the people they wanted actively in the final group, but she was probably someone they would have been okay with, or at least in the final 18. Mind you, really, if Mnet knows what's good for themselves, they should have made sure that they would be okay with any of the 99 trainees being in the group, because without vote rigging, literally anything could happen. After rewatching this segment, I think that she was more of an accessory to Yujin's growth than she was a player in her own story. This is unfortunately something that happens to many people on survival shows, as we'll discuss later. Anyway, moving on to the performance. We get lots of good reactions from the judges and audience, especially emphasising Yujin's high note. Side note, I don't think Bahie's facial expression suited this song, but the show was, of course, a time of massive general improvement for her and she still hit all of the major beats. I wonder if it had anything to do with her bad outfit and weird white eyeliner? Because those things definitely seemed weird to me. During the evaluation, we get the obvious dramatic music and nervous editing. And of course, despite this, they are praised. They had good energy, they seemed like a debut team, Maya and Shinwei have both improved a lot, and Yujin especially is praised for her good image and confidence. She seems like a sensitive person, so the evaluation probably hit her hard, and I'm glad to see she was praised after all of her efforts. Next we have Team Utopia. They're praised right off the bat, since they have a nice song and members with good balance. But since the song is hard to understand and interpret, the audience are primed to be nervous and to expect them to struggle a lot in evaluations, especially since there are high expectations for the members. Jing Chao is highlighted as the weak link in dance, and hence begin our flashbacks, which show her having issues and the others being concerned. Here is where we get the angel editing yet again of Bora, who really didn't need editing to seem angelic. Bora helps Jing Chao, even using Chinese to do so. We see her speaking Chinese, Japanese, English, and Korean to try and help people throughout the show, which just shows how dedicated she is, both in terms of leadership and in terms of generally being a nice person. Yeso also helps, which is good for her kind-hearted Mnet image. Interestingly, for this mission, we get next to no screen time for Urina. I guess Mnet decided that she was either guaranteed to be in the group or guaranteed to not be in the group. In interims, we find out that the group had only prepared up to the second verse, since Jing Chao only knows that much. This is bad, to the point that even Bora starts to express concerns, albeit very politely since she is Bora. But of course, for the sake of editing, if nothing else, it gets far worse. Jing Chao makes mistakes right from the start and the other trainees have to correct her. Her mistakes and other issues are highlighted again and again, and the editing even makes it look like she's started to affect the other members. She's criticised again and again by the mentors, even in comparison to others like Chaehyun who are also criticised. The fact that Jing Chao says she thinks she's doing better in her confessional could make some people think that she's arrogant, hence probably why Mnet included it. This is another interesting moment that shows the power of editing. I said Chaehyun was criticised, right? But that hasn't actually happened yet. After Jing Chao is criticised in the interim, we are completely blindsided by Chaehyun being the worst member on the leaderboard, because her mistakes just weren't highlighted during the interim performance. Again, showing the power of editing. We now have two people to scrutinise, but while Chaehyun has a highlight as someone who is too hard on herself and someone who is in general an amazing person and vocalist, Jing Chao is a burden to her team and potentially arrogant, so you can see the disconnect between how we perceive them. Assuming that Mnet want Chaehyun in the group, and they probably did, this builds into portraying her as someone who is humble and improves a lot, something shown right at the start from her Black Mamba performance. During the performance, Yeso and Bora do a good job, as always, and everyone loves Bora's high note, as always. Jing Chao and Chaehyun both make mistakes, which are highlighted. In the evaluation, instantly the judges talk about how they feel sorry for Chaehyun, which softens the blow of her having made a mistake. We also get an interesting set of feedback here. Urina and Yeso are praised, thus highlighted. Bora is given no feedback. I guess the implication is that she always does well and there's nothing new for them to say to her. Chaehyun is given mixed feedback and Jing Chao, as expected, is criticised heavily. Kooyoung gives nice feedback about the choreography. Of course, there's lots of crying backstage since they all feel bad. Survival Show 101. Moving on to You Plus Me team, where we're back with Kyung, who highlights aspects of the choreography we should be looking out for. But the team themselves are highlighted as being very nervous, and Suyeon especially lacks confidence, with time pressures also highlighted, since the team had several new members. Mashiro's good leadership is also highlighted. Kyung joining the practice room is good. I love to see the mentors actually mentoring in the training rooms rather than just giving one-off feedback. But since mistakes are highlighted, Shana and Suyeon are clearly stressed, and his face is blank, so we worry, which is justified since he criticizes their interpretation of the song. Shana is shown to be lovely and sweet here, which is a great edit for both her and Suyeon. During the interim evaluation, Suyeon becomes more confident and gets lots of praise, in line with her arc, and her teammates are also highlighted since they helped her. We get lots of inspirational music and everyone practicing to show how hard-working they are, which adds justification to them winning the round. We also get lots of nice moments of them being goofy with each other, which is nice since we don't get tons of the actual trainees' personalities on these shows. Personalities are important to secure debuts, so it makes sense for companies to basically hide or show personalities as they see fit to lift up their favourites. We're still seeing language barriers though. During the performance, which is my favourite one for the round, we get highlights of Youngin's vocals, Shana's vocals, and Suyeon's killing part. There were a few poorly executed moves or other mistakes, especially from Jinyu, but these weren't highlighted, so we have no reason to notice them. I personally think they were also the best dressed team, and never underestimate the power of styling, but Youngin's shirt did look a little bit too tight. I feel like Bahie has the second highest number of performance reactions in this show or something, but maybe I just notice her reacting a lot and she's salient to me. During the evaluation, You Plus Me team are praised right off the bat, especially Suyeon's confidence and mentality, two things that are really important for the industry. Oddly enough, all three girls who got the Planet Pass were in this team and they were praised. Finally, we move on to the drama-filled Snake team, Snake being a concept that minors really shouldn't have been allowed to do. I heard previously that this team had been given a lot of C-group evil edits, so I was worried. Xiaoting's visuals are emphasized, no surprise, since she was the one they clearly wanted for a visual in the group. Dion is also highlighted again as a leader, no surprises there. Richie is asked a question about the changing of parts, which instantly gets us on edge as we head into the flashback. During the interim evaluations, other teams, as we previously saw, were criticised heavily, which makes Snake Team, especially Xiaoting and Dion, understandably nervous. Richie's words are criticised right off the bat. Just look at these nasty zooms and the emphasis of her supposedly swallowing nervously. Hikaru is highlighted as being good, of course. All three Signal Song centres are in this group, and you can expect them to be highlighted the most, since they include the two non-C group members of this team, and Xiaoting, who is Mnet's favourite C group member. Ruchi and her rhythm are criticised, and Yanning is told to try for main vocal. I found what Yanning said interesting here. I heard someone say that she chose her words carefully in this scene, and she definitely did. Just take a look at how self-deprecating she is. Either way, Ruchi saying that Yanning didn't initially try in her confessional, and then saying that she hates Yanning's part makes her seem selfish and possessive, and the fact that Dion is flustered because of it, or so the subtitles say, makes this seem even worse, since you need to remember that Dion is the best leader on this show. Even Xiaoting steps in here to say that Ruchi should try it. This highlights Dion and Xiaoting positively, as they are able to focus on what is best for the team, while trying to do right by the members as much as possible. Shots of Ruchi looking at her nails and yawning, intercut with Dion looking at her, makes Ruchi seem ungrateful and arrogant, and poor Dion too scared to confront her. This, combined with a lack of focus and effort in dancing, more yawning, and other members looking awkward around her, shows her effect on the team, and implies that she's bringing them down. Wonjae confronts her about it. I do like Wonjae, and she seems like one of the more no-nonsense trainees on the show, as she confronted both her Yes or Yes team and Ruchi here. Although she could be seen as adding to the conflict, I think the fact that people's bad behaviour was shown before her confrontations shields her from that. But not entirely. She is still the one who voices her thoughts out loud, while Dion and Hikaru, who are the stars of the show here, have the decency, as such, to keep their thoughts private. So that makes me wonder whether the choice to show a Chinese trainee confronting Ruchi makes Chinese trainees look even worse and less demure. Dion talks to Xiaoting about this, which is good for both of them. It shows Xiaoting to be reliable and empathetic, and Dion to be humble enough to ask for help. It also shows how the language barriers are still here, since Dion has to use some English and hand gestures to communicate with Xiaoting, not just Korean or Chinese. As they confront Ruchi, shots of Ruchi crying and then Dion's blank face makes it seem like Ruchi is being manipulative, and the fact that Dion then encourages her paints Dion as an even better leader than before. In rehearsals, Yanning's mistakes are highlighted and she's told she's too greedy, criticised again and again. I'm genuinely kind of surprised that Ruchi and Yanning weren't eliminated after all of this, but I guess they were just too popular. Interestingly, this entire time Chai Bing has been nowhere to be seen, and her part was cut. Mnet probably knew she was done for. During the performance, I oddly felt that Dion's facial expressions were way too much, even though I liked her facial expressions in the interim check. I think they had the worst styling out of all of the teams as well, and I absolutely hated Xiaoting and Wonjae's outfits. The Masters' reactions suggest that Yanning and Ruchi did poorly, and Yanning had several highlighted mistakes. On the flip side, Dion and Hikaru are shown to do a good job. During their evaluation, Hikaru, Dion and Xiaoting are praised heavily, while Yanning is criticised for her dynamics with the song and vocals, and Ruchi is of course just criticised. During the announcement of the round winners, people are obviously stressed and holding hands. The difference is said to be small, but this is mostly artificial, since Mnet have the ability to make whichever team they want win. U plus Me team win, as we knew, with Suyeon crying and pointing out how it's her first time she's received a benefit, which is nice. This is the end of her brilliant confidence arc, which takes her to rank 10. Mashiro gives a good speech about how she hopes this will allow more of them to survive. Did it? I don't know. And of course the next mission is announced, the 000 mission. Everyone seems a bit depressed. Hikaru looks absolutely baffled, and I am pissed off alongside Yujin, going from one mission to another constantly. And as expected, everyone looks stressed about the eliminations. Alright, my general end of the episode thoughts. I thought it was really weird that there was another mission here with the signal song. This didn't happen in Boys Planet, and from my limited knowledge of Produce, I don't think it happened there either. So was this just another way in which Girls Planet tried to distance itself from Produce? Why did 000 appear so many times in Girls Planet? Anyway, it's also weird that the sports day, which took up half the episode on Boys Planet, takes up only a small segment here. What was different? Was Girls Planet's version just super boring? We're almost there. I believe we can do it. And we're back again with Jingu, and with Wonjae being goofy. Just as we ended off the last episode with the 000 mission, we start this episode with the resolution of that mission, before the stress of the eliminations. Apparently this version of 000 is the debut group's version of the song. I literally have no clue what that means. Are they talking about the formations? The arrangement? I have no clue, because I personally noticed nothing particularly exciting, except the fancy name. The Planet Guardians also voted to sort the members into groups, which I think is interesting. I have no clue by which metrics people voted. Did they pick trainees they thought would work well with their one pick? Trainees they thought their one pick would outshine? Their ideal top 9? I have no clue. How it works for these ones is that it's an individual evaluation but a team performance, which of course causes stress and animosity between members of each team. One person from each group will get a benefit based on the fan cam views. When we get to the groups, we see even more of Bahie speculating about things and more of Wonjae being goofy, making me wish more and more for her to have been in the debut group as a Gyuvin-esque figure. We get the usual shenanigans as the teams are picked and people being happy with their teammates or upset about their opponents. And Wonjae makes an interesting comment about how Team 1 will be the debut team, since they are highly ranked. However, this leads to an interesting situation where lots of popular trainees are in one group, hence they have more competition for the individual benefit, in comparison to Bahie, who really easily won it for her group. Alright, on to the first team. This is Yeso's story, as she clearly hasn't had enough screen time on this show, but either way, it's still her story. As with many people on this show, her arc is that she's lacking confidence. Yujin gets the killing part and Yeso doesn't, solidifying her lack of confidence. Yurina also gets a good edit here. She gets vocal 1 and says she still thinks she lacks skill, but continues to practice, showing her to be humble and hardworking. Now we take a moment to switch to Team 2, where Bahie ironically takes leadership by asking who wants to be the leader. Honestly, I think she should have just put her hand up for it. It would have been another way in which we could have seen her improve. But Shana volunteers Mei, who is clearly nervous but happy to do it, and who seems to do a good job. Team 3 contrasts Team 2 as they all seem happy and energetic, as opposed to Team 2 just looking worried. Manami gets the killing part, and I think this is great for her. I'm kind of surprised she didn't make the debut team and didn't even make it through these eliminations, but I guess she just didn't have a big enough one-pick fandom. Anyway, Bora is the main vocal as always, and everything else seems to go well. As much as I think it was pretty horrid for Mnet to squeeze in yet another mission right at the end of the show, I think OOO was the best option since it was a song the girls all already knew. We can see Team 3 especially looking more relaxed, and this was probably because they already knew the song and mostly just had to learn different formations. Back to Team 2, they're still nervous, and combined with difficulties they've been having in the formations, are starting to spiral. Interestingly, I never noticed Bahie in these shots of them spiraling, but again, she's just a very salient figure to me. This makes us think that this team will be the one with the, or a, improvement arc. During the Team 1 performance, I was confused about why everyone was so awed. Was it just because it was odd to see 9 people on stage as opposed to 99? Mnet only shows short clips of the actual performances, not the whole thing. Hence, there's no real chance to highlight any of the trainees or their mistakes, and this makes sense since it's mostly just a filler mission. The only people I noticed who were highlighted in any particular way, mostly just through being given more screen time, were Dion, Hikaru, and Yurina. During Team 2's performance, we get a flashback to the interim evaluations, since they're clearly the underdogs here. Yanning, Suyeon, and Chaibing are highlighted as making mistakes, and the rest of the team are as well. Yanning especially is highlighted with lots of mistakes, and the team are criticised since they are good dancers and already know the song but are still making mistakes. Hence, the whole team are depressed and on the verge of giving up. Interestingly, from an OT8 perspective, Bahie isn't highlighted as having any mistakes. Yet more confirmation for my belief that Mnet didn't mind having her in the group, as opposed to people like Chaibing and Yanning, who they clearly didn't want in and evil edited. During the Team 3 evaluation, which is also shown, they are contrasted to Team 2. They sing where Team 2 didn't, and they're shown to just generally create a stellar performance, which even makes the Masters and the other girls cry. We also get footage of them breathing heavily, showing how hard they tried and how much effort they put in compared to Team 2, and to a lesser extent, Team 1. Then we get to the Team 2 and 3 performances. Nothing super exciting, except that Manami did a great job. Then we get the mandatory fan video, with Mnet counting the tears the girls shed for some reason. I don't know if I want these segments to continue on survival shows. On one hand, I hate how they make the trainees sad. On the other hand, as long as there's at least one video for every single trainee, I guess I don't mind that much, since it shows them that they're supported and worth it. I liked the guy who showed Mashiro's name tag right after she asked him to. He clearly had the foresight to realise that she would be curious. Alright, on to the survival announcement. Maya and Yujin have a cute intro together, which makes me wonder about what could have been if they were both in the group together. For the OOO mission, the benefits we have are Bahie for Team 2, duh, Youngin for Team 3, which means she got both the group and individual benefits, and Yujin for Team 1, which is another duh. Bahie points out how this is her first time having the benefit, which is nice. Next we get into the actual eliminations, where it's revealed that Chaibing was 26th in the mid-vote ranking, which is insane. I knew she was eliminated and I knew her ranking fell a lot, but I didn't realise it was that bad. Cue everyone looking stressed, apart from Wonjae, who seems like the type to hide her stress with jokes and faked confidence. Rank 16 is Jing Chao. I'm kind of surprised she wasn't eliminated here considering her edit. I love how for rank 15, Wonjae even manages to predict what Jingu says, that the person came from We Are team. Anyway, rank 15 ends up being Bora, which is of course deserved, and she seems very happy about it. Rank 14 is Wonjae, who gave a nice speech. Rank 13 is Bahie, and everyone seems happy, with one person even singing her name. She gives a nice speech and is clearly aware of how uncertain and fluctuating her rank is, which she can't do anything about, but it's nice to be aware of, I guess. This was the point where I started wondering whether they show the previous ranks of contestants whenever they're on screen to create artificial tension, and I think it is. By showing these ranks, audiences can feel safe about someone who later gets eliminated, or are worried about someone who was just on the edge of the cutoff and could have either fallen or risen. When we get to rank 12, the trainees are surprised that there aren't any J group trainees yet, and I agree. It was absolutely criminal that no K group trainees were eliminated in this episode. I don't think any of them deserve to be eliminated, but it was absolutely ridiculous that none of them were. It's entirely possible that one of the reasons Maya was saved was because she was Korean, so Mnet could have even more Koreans than Japanese and Chinese trainees in the finale. And in the end, half of the people who made it to the finals were Korean, which is insane. It's been said before, but why even bother calling this a global show and a global girl group when it's just Korean people plus a few people who are the least offensive foreigners? Rank 12 is Yeso, which shocks everyone, but although Yeso seems upset, which is fair, she gives a nice and thankful speech. This is yet another reminder that no one is ever safe on these shows. Rank 11 is Chaehyun, and she is another person who makes everyone floored with her low rank. Chaehyun's speech could be considered a little bit selfish since it's entirely self-focused and includes very little thanks for others, but I think it shows just how stressful these shows are, and how you can't even consider yourself safe until you're being called for the debut group. And even then there are things which can bring you down. Ahem, X1. Another important thing to note is that Chaehyun has been portrayed positively throughout this whole show, so we don't have any reason to see her as anything other than genuine and genuinely stressed. As opposed to if someone like Ruchi had made this exact same speech, we'd be primed to think of her as selfish, so this would seem even more so. Rank 9 and 10 are called together as they were on Boys Planet. I love how the subs say that rank 9 is likely to debut. Like, no, the ranks can fluctuate a lot. But in the end, rank 10 is Ruchi and rank 9 is Youngin, and Youngin did debut, so I guess the subtitles were accidentally correct. Or Mnet just knew that Youngin would debut since they promoted her so much. We see from the trainees talking that the dramatic music that's played in the episode is probably also played in the actual studio, which is really funny because I wouldn't be able to stop laughing if I was one of the trainees. Also, lots of people are surprised that Ruchi is so low, but this makes sense. Not only with her evil edit, but also because people are cutting out their filler pics at this point. But we also can't expect the girls to know either of those things, since they didn't even know that they were the experimental group to begin with. I love how Jingu says, "There's been a change in the top 9. Like, duh, man. Rank 8 is Yanning, and we still haven't had a single person from J group, which is worrying, since even though a lot of them were high up, a lot of them were also eliminated. 7th is Shana, who is a great example of the first time top 9ers struggling with the necklaces. Rank 6 is Urina, which shocks everyone, but this again is what happens when you get this far in the competition, and this is the continuation of her downfall as filler pics are filtered out. She understandably seems upset, but seems to have overcome her lacking confidence arc, saying that she knows she has fans now. She also says that she'll do her best from now on, which is funny because have you not been doing your best already? I know what she means, and there could have been some translation hijinks involved, but still it's a bit funny. Rank 5 is Yujin, who is, as always, sweet. And at this point we can see that Suyeon, after having been the Planet Pass last elimination, clearly believes she won't survive this one. All of the girls guessing what's going to happen while Jingu eyes them through this entire segment is hilarious as a side note. He's great at being infuriating and wringing all of the tension out of the announcements to test the patience of both the girls and the audience, which is probably why he comes back so much. Rank 4 is Hikaru, and Mashiro seems to have decided at this point that she's also being eliminated. But then we have our rank 1 candidates announced, and hilariously, everyone wonders if it's even necessary to announce it. Daeyeon, Xiaoting, and Mashiro. Shinwei kisses Xiaoting, which is... well, it's whatever you interpret it as, but this is the first season of Gaze Planet, and if you are a Gaze Planet fan, you may think of Urina looking at Xiaoting as a sign of jealousy over the kiss. So let's just say Gaze Planet people are never running out of material. Mashiro is ranked 3rd and has a nice speech, as we would expect from such an accomplished leader. At this point in my notes, I wrote a mini rant about how honourable first place is and how no one can ever hope to be so honoured and exalted other than the wondrous first place. It's seriously insane how they act like it's life or death. The difference between first and second when it really isn't. The dramatic music here is insane, and the sudden cut between the pre-ad break music and the post-ad break music is hilarious. Rank 2 is Dion and rank 1 is Xiaoting, as expected for both of them, especially since we've been seeing Dion's growth and editing as a leader. Xiaoting being first so much makes me wonder what her average rank was, and also how you'd calculate it considering the CKJ ranking system. She obviously couldn't challenge Hanbin in Boys Planet, but would she have had a chance of challenging Sejong's average? Or did her ranking 9th in the finale ruin that? Probably. Anyway, moving on to the rank 17 candidates, where I think it's a shame that Manami was the only one from We Are team to be eliminated, especially since the three of them worked very well together and she would have been great in the final group. Anyway, Suyeon is ranked 17 and is understandably shocked, and I hope it improved her confidence. And this brings even more attention to the massive number of K-group trainees going through. Even Yeso and Bahie, who seem to have become buddies over this elimination, point out how many there are. Now onto the Planet Pass. I always find it interesting to think about which girls wanted which trainees to be picked for the Planet Pass. I think Bahie really wanted Manami. We have several candidates here. Maya is steady and has potential despite her age. Manami is stable and good at her parts, and Ruan already got a Planet Pass but has the potential to join the debut group. This interestingly made me think of how no one who ever got a Planet Pass made the final group, although a decent number of them did make the finale. As we all know, Maya gets the Planet Pass, which is well deserved, but which completes the horridness of no K-group trainees being eliminated in this episode. I also found it odd that Kooyoung looks 1, sick, and 2, like he's reading from a script in the flashbacks. I mean, it's not weird that he's reading from a script since that's to be expected, but why sick? Poor guy. Anyway, Maya is through, so cue the sad speech of the last survivor and the tears that will no doubt follow. And of course, Maya is being babied again, which just reminds me of how she is way too young to be in the final group. Then we get the dramatics of next week being the final week, and of course, Shanna is right that the ranks will shift. Yet again, I am shocked that people thought the final group would be 3-3-3. All of the trainees look super grey and exhausted, especially people like Youngin and Wonjae, which isn't surprising. At the end of the episode, the ranks of the survivors are revealed, and I always find the ranks of the Planet Pass survivors interesting. Maya was 25th, making her the second last and only one rank above Chai Bing, and they still brought her through to the finale? Which was interesting. During the end credit scene, Shinwei is able to give her speech, cutely asking for a microphone after she was unable to talk directly after being eliminated. I like how they show a mini behind the scenes of the trainees leaving, because it shows us more candid moments as such, like showing how everyone loves Manami, but it's also really depressing. We see highlights for Manami with the rest of We Are team and Chai Bing and Sin Wei who reminisce on their time on the show. It's nice that we also see everyone taking a picture together, but it makes me wonder if that happened with the other eliminations. I also find it interesting that none of the Japanese trainees got a speaking segment at the end like Chai Bing and Sin Wei did. Even more invisible editing for the Japanese trainees. Also, you can see Bahie crying here. Yet another point against those who say she has no empathy. The preview for the final episode is more hopeful since there isn't really any drama they can edit if it's live, or at least not as much. Oddly enough, Bahie's voice is distinctive enough that I can hear her even through the screams of all of the other trainees. And then finally, we're on to the last episode. This is the one episode that I actually watched part of live when it came out, so I knew some of what was happening here, although I did end up starting to watch partway through. I don't remember Another Dream, but I do remember seeing Shine live, even though I didn't see the practice for that dance. This is the episode that starts with the mandatory mini documentary style segment which covers the dreams of each of the girls, and of course has a super dramatic intro since this was live streamed. It includes short and sweet final confessions where people express their excitement, their need to work hard, their wishes to not have regrets, and so on. Yujin is the one who kickstarts the wish to be on stage more. something which has been her clear desire the whole time and which leads us nicely into other trainees saying they want to do more, and thus into the OOO stage. But before that, a quick side note. I love how they showed a mini behind the scenes of building the set for the finale, and I wish we could have seen more of this because I love this kind of thing. Onto the OOO performance. It looks like this may have been arranged based on the final ranks from the previous episode, but that just makes me wonder, why is Bahie so far on the side? Why is Ruchi behind people? Both should probably be further to the front. Goodness knows what happened here. And even though it is based on ranks, it's always bothered me here that Mashiro is the J group center, even though Hikaru was the original one. It's just annoying that 2 out of 3 of them are the same people, but one person is different. Compared to the finale of Boys Planet, this finale seems even more empty than it initially did, with no audience. And on another note, why does Yujin look like she's aged 5 years between the previous episode and this one? Is that just the effect of stress on a person? Is her makeup and styling different? I think it is. I think it has something to do with so much of her forehead being visible. We get some poignant music to introduce Jingu and a super dramatic flyby of all of the contestants, but you can't even see their faces with how fast it's going, so what's the point? And why does it kind of make Jingu himself look like a contestant? Why do all of the girls turn a bit like robots? Why is this so weird? I know we joke that idols are robots, but that doesn't mean they should actually become them. Next, we have the full version of the documentary section, which shows some auditions, and for some reason has next to no subtitles. Everyone obviously talks about how they wanted to get involved in K-pop, and Yeso nerdily mentions endorphins. Other topics of conversation are pretty obvious. Wanting to perform in front of people, and so on. We get the usual segment as well of those who were planned to debut and had their debuts cancelled for some reason or another. I also find it funny when we hear from people who've already debuted. Like, they've literally already debuted. I understand it doesn't guarantee success, but I find it funny when they talk about how much they want to debut while they literally already have. And of course we have the people who are on their last chance. Basically we have the holy trinity of wanting to debut, last chances, and missing out, and the other holy trinity of praise the masters, praise the show, and praise the planet guardians. I also find it very ironic that the show says it's the first debut project between Korea, Japan, and China, but they did a terrible job of it, so they can't really boast about it. We also get to see the masters voting, which makes me wonder who they all vote for. I initially wondered if they were even allowed to vote since they're also part of the show, and whether the trainees were allowed to vote, but Hui revealed in a post-Boys Planet interview that he voted, so I assume that both the trainees and masters are allowed to vote. Bringing me back to my original question, who are they voting for? I'm very curious and I want to hear it all. We then get to some planet guardians who get to talk live, although it's hard to identify who they support, since, I can't read Korean. And I don't know about other platforms for the show, but mine didn't have subtitles. Then we get the thanking of the masters and words of support for the trainees from the masters. An odd thing which is potentially to cause stress voting and which didn't happen in Boys Planet, probably since Mnet were pretty happy with the Boys Planet lineup. Of course, everyone is stressed when those 2 people are Hikaru and Xiaoting, since of course everyone wants them in the group. This clearly had some effect since they both got in, and this is probably why Mnet did it, because they didn't want to have no Chinese people in the final lineup and they didn't want to have no Hikaru. Next, the announcement of the completion mission. If there is one thing I've really liked about Girls Planet, it was all the fun names for the missions. For some reason they all started with C. I'm unsure why they say the trainees will become members of the final group through the songs. It makes it sound like the songs will allow them to debut when they really won't. I also like how you can see the massive difference between the demo version of Shine and the final version. Yet another interesting thing is how they perform it all together. I'm unsure if something like this has ever happened on another survival show outside of the mandatory ballad and everyone performing the signal song together. The point of this mission is that one team will win the right to be in the front at the end of the song. This team will be chosen by the masters. I relate to Shana, this is needlessly confusing. They choose from the lowest rank up and then have the potential to be shoved out, which is the same system that Boys Planet used. And of course this leads to more team picking shenanigans. Maya is cute, but the pressure of being the lowest rank makes it understandable why she looks like she's going to her death. Meanwhile, Wonjae and Bora are goofy. This is probably Bora's only even vaguely mediocre edit on the show, since it's said that she's hard on her team with practice times. But this isn't even framed as a bad thing. This moment also made me surprised that Wonjae was never evil edited on the show, making her one of the few Chinese trainees to escape Mnet's clutches. She was always brash and spoke confidently, and sometimes said questionable things and got into conflicts, so it would have been pretty easy to evil edit her. But I get the impression from the fact that they didn't evil edit her that Mnet liked her and possibly even wanted her in the group, or at the very least did want her in the finale, since they gave her good edits and the planet pass. You know, good for her. These segments are always interesting because we see why people want to join certain teams. For instance, Urina choosing based on the part she wants to perform, and Yujin deciding based on the parts potentially, or also maybe based on the people. Team 1 is Jiating, Yujin, Urina, Yanning, Yeso, Jingchao, Bahie, Suyeon, and Mashiro, and Team 2 is Daeon, Bora, Youngin, Shanna, Chaehyun, Hikaru, Maya, Ruchi, and Wonjae. First, we look at Team 1, where Mashiro isn't the leader for once, and she gets a lacking confidence edit, which is interesting since it's so late in the series, but it does add context to her visceral reaction to being announced for the final group. I find this group really interesting. Not only was this the first time that Mnet showed Bahie actually expressing interest in taking a part, but it also suggested that Mashiro lost a part to Bahie. So take that, OT8s. It also shows how responsible Mashiro is, since she was willing to take one for the team. And it shows how Yujin and Urina are very empathetic and comforting people. Moving on to Team 2, where the comment is made that the people who take the killing part will definitely debut. Since the two people who did the killing part were Daeon and Jiating, this did in fact turn out to be true, although it's pretty obvious over these shows that taking a killing part in no way secures your debut, or even your survival to the next round. This was also, I believe, the first time in the show that they showed the trainees actually learning the dance for the killing part. This is another point of diversion from Boys Planet, where the audience picked the trainee for the killing part after watching partial fan cams. I also liked that in this segment you could see everyone working together to learn, even though this could have caused issues later on, as in when someone you helped becomes your competition for the killing part. We also, as expected, get even more Daeon screen time here. Now we're back to the live segments, which is proudly and dramatically proclaimed to be live in Korea. As with everything in this episode, live segments are drawn out to the ends of the world and are needlessly dramatic. They also needlessly and excessively glorify the name of the group, rank 1, the debut group itself, the audience, and the masters, as expected. It's kind of crazy looking back that this is when we first learnt the name of the group. I still think Cosmics would have been better, but as I did say in my Rewriting Kepler episode, Kepler ended up being a good name for the group, considering they could use Kep1 Going and other fun Kep1 calling cards. I also wonder, surely it's staged that the Masters say the name is amazing, right? There's no way they thought that both Kepler and Zero Base 1 were good names, right? Next we get to the interim checks and the deciding of the ending part for Shine. I knew that final performances can impact someone's rank, but I really do find it hard to believe that it has so much of an impact that the trainees have to be stressing about it this much. I mean, Mashiro still debuted fine and she was the lowest part in the losing team. But maybe Mnet has different data to me. This is the conclusion of the Yujin Yanning arc with them being friends, despite the fact that Mnet will continue to milk the We Go Up clip to the end of time. It's also nice that they became friends, and it shows how little we should believe Mnet's editing. Now on to the interim performances. Team 1 are given compliments for Jiating and are generally told they did a good job and have good energy. Team 2's introduction is with Daeon and Jiating pitted against each other, and when Chaehyun's leadership is highlighted. This is yet another moment where Chaehyun could easily have been edited weirdly if Mnet didn't like her, but of course they do like her, so every time she says something weird, it's ignored. For this team, there are highlights for Bora, Hikaru, and Daeon. Fun fact. They are told they were better than Team 1. They had cleaner dancing and accents on the choreography compared to Team 1, who had better vocals. This segment also makes me wonder how much of the judges' final decision to have Team 2 do the ending part was influenced by Mnet's desire to highlight Daeon. She seems to have influenced how they edited the show a lot, and since she was the centre of Team 2, this was a perfect extra chance to highlight her. Was this partially to give her a victory after she had lost so many times? The segment of the Masters deciding which team to pick is, as expected, very staged. Mnet almost certainly picked almost all of these things. The team composition, which group won, which trainees got the planet pass, etc., instead of the Masters, or at least would have had influenced the Masters' choices. I can't believe they set up a whole room, did makeup and everything, and then probably just had several rehearsals of a scripted scene of the Masters deciding which team would win. If I was one of the Masters, I would riot. Except they probably get paid a lot, so maybe I wouldn't riot. I think Boys Planet's decision to have the 2 final songs was better, but this is part of Girls Planet being experimental after all. And of course, after all of that, the Masters don't even reveal their decision, and we get a cliffhanger and get to wonder. Next, of course, onto the actual performance for Shine. I remember when I saw this live, I had no clue that survival shows did finale performances and things, and I was even more confused when a second group came out, especially since I didn't know who anyone was outside of Bahie and Yujin. Anyway, I don't like Xiaoting's outfit, it looks stiff and unflattering. In the end, Team 2 won, something which I knew from when I saw this live. Clearly Mnet decided they wanted better dancers, or just Dion, or both. I do know that when I first watched this, Suyeon really stood out to me, and she still does. I was very happy when I found out she joined Billy. And you know, after me going on and on and on about how which parts you get for the finale doesn't matter, I'm still left wondering where Mashiro's 2 seconds of lines were, because I didn't actually see her get any seconds of lines, honestly. Poor Mashiro. It's kind of crazy how after watching the actual show, I know so many of the faces in the crowd now, whereas before they were just a bunch of random girls to me. Next we get to the picnic, where we see the auditions of the girls, and they get to have a sweet moment together where they look at the messages they wrote for their future selves. Probably creating core memories, honestly. Chaehyun's letter made me feel sad, since she said that it wasn't too hard so far, but in the time since that letter, it had undoubtedly become tens of times harder for her, and she probably felt like she'd lost some sense of innocence about how hard survival shows really were. I also thought it was nice that they got the trainees to write messages to other trainees, but how did they pick who would send a message to who? Did they just pick who they thought would be the top 20 and then get the other trainees to send them messages? Did they just give tons of messages for everyone? Did people volunteer to give messages? What was going on? And yes, we are still, after several months, seeing language barriers. Good job, Mnet. Next we move on to another dream. The meeting with the songwriters, as with most things in this show, seems very staged. Although I still do want to see more things like this, the song recording and such, especially since it seems to make the trainees really happy that they're doing actual, quote, idol activities. It also gives us fun tidbits, like how it looks like they filmed some of this in Wake One's practice room. I also wonder how they picked Yeso to be the centre for another dream. Was it because of her Fate performance, or because they really wanted her to be the maknae and wanted to highlight her more? I also like how the bows on the microphones hide the trainees' mouths, so they could stuff up a lip sync or something and you'd never know. Mind you, this did seem to be partially live as opposed to the finale of Boys Planet, which was almost entirely lip synced. I wonder who made these choices. I also wonder how many of the cute candid moments of trainees singing to each other were staged or rehearsed. There's also this really interesting moment after the performance where Jingu says, "Another dream was the last performance, the journey of Girls Planet is over," and there's this background effect of a symbol. Way to make people subtly anxious, Mnet. Actually, when I looked back, I think this was just a repeating motif in the background music that happened to play at the right time, but it was still conveniently stressful. Also, OMG, voting closed. Whatever will I do? It's not like this show is over 3 years old and I have absolutely no control over the results at all. Jingu then proceeds to have 2 awkward conversations with 1, a Suyeon fan who was no doubt upset when she didn't get into Kepler and was no doubt happy when she debuted with Billy, and 2, Yeyoung, who says she's rooting for Dion and Suyeon. So Suyeon had 2 votes to her name, I guess. The next segment is the Planet Food Party, which is probably partially here so Mnet can convince everyone that they're not starving the trainees. It's cute that they drew each other, but I thought that most of the drawings were pretty bad, outside of Dion's drawing of Hikaru. Shana's was okay, I didn't understand Youngin's, and Yeso did a good job with Jing Chao. Next, the planet dinner, which they all seemed to like. I'm not sure why Yanning was so fascinated with the half-boiled eggs though. Had she never had one before? It was interesting that we had this segment to begin with as well. Not only did we not have it on Boys Planet, but it also vaguely reminds me of Squid Game, which is concerning. Just the thought that they're eating a fancy meal on the last day did it, I think. Anyway, we get the usual banter during this scene, so here's what we learned. Wonjae was possibly intimidated by Ruchi, but they became friends. Same with Yujin and Yanning, and Chaehyun and Hikaru. Hikaru is also a practice freak who is obsessed with details. And then we get a nice campfire, as Bahie points out, but as Bahie does not point out, also with a bunch of cameras and directors, so it's probably not super fun and relaxing anyway. This is another segment where we learn a lot, although we also learn some things the trainees may not be super keen on us knowing. We learn that Maya and her family speak English, that Bahie seems to have created some sort of relationship with Diane's mum, that Wonjae is missing her parents and that her mum has died, and that Bora and Wonjae seem to have become close friends, which makes sense. The segment of Wonjae missing her dad and talking to her dead mum is overall a good highlight for her, as depressing as it is. It shows a good relationship with her family and provides a lot of sympathy from the audience. However, it came too late for anyone extra to vote for her since, well, the votes had closed a few minutes previously. Then we have another nice touching VCR to show how far they've come. In true survival fashion, which reminds you of everything that made you cry so far, so you remain sad and invested. It also increases the runtime of the show and drags out the time before the top 9 are announced, which is something Mnet loves. Then we get to the top 9. OMG, the top 9 seats are here. Who will debut? There's so much suspense. At this point, we finally get to the top 9 announcement, and some of the girls look like they're going to faint, which honestly makes sense. They have to stand there like pretty little dolls while their livelihoods and dreams are at stake. And this is one of the reasons people get invested in making sure their favourite trainee achieves their dreams. I understand why people enjoy watching these shows, I guess, but I have no clue why anyone would think they're good. They just contribute even more to the dehumanization and commercialization of idols, and especially very young idols. Jing Chao is the only one with a smile here. Maybe she just knew that she wasn't going to make it and was there for just a good time at that point, especially considering how far she'd risen from the start of the show. And it gets worse. They can't even react to the things Jingu says for various reasons. Anyway, rank 8. Now, if you know survival shows, you know these announcements are drawn out so much that there's one every 10 minutes or so. And that's exactly what it's like here. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that there's an excessive number of pauses, an excessive amount of dramatic music, and an excessive number of misleading camera movements and statements. And we get a misleading camera right off the bat, since as soon as the 8 pops up, so does Yeso's face. If I was Yeso, I would have had a heart attack. These segments are so not worth your time. There are points where Jingu literally just stands there so still that he looks like a screenshot. It's cheap tension, and unless you're seriously invested, you're better off just sleeping or doing other tasks and checking back the next day, or at least in a few minutes. There's a reason I read during these announcements. If you do decide to watch them, I'd really recommend looking at the reactions of the trainees, to each other being called, to the camera focusing on them, or to the clues the MC gives. In Boys Planet, people didn't seem to have that many reactions, but in Girls Planet, a lot of the trainees seemed comfortable pointing to people they thought would be called next, and things like that. Anyway, as we all know, Mashiro is rank 8 after her 2 seconds of lines in Shine, and after that she definitely didn't think she was making it. She literally didn't even prepare anything, but in the end she gave a nice speech thanking everyone and saying she'll work hard, which is about as good as it gets. Interestingly, I don't even think she gave a speech in Japanese, which is unusual. I found it interesting that they didn't give the girls towels to put over their legs when they went up, but I suppose that 1, they had to look as elegant and as beautiful as possible despite being sleep deprived and stressed, and 2, since there wasn't a live audience there to film them, they probably didn't need to worry about things like upskirt shots as much anyway. On to rank 7. You know, I know, even the other trainees suspected it was Hikaru. She gave a nice short speech, speaking both Japanese and Korean, and I'm happy that she was able to just straight up say she was happy. There's also an interesting moment where she reels someone in, presumably wishing for that person to also join the debut group. I'm really curious about who that person was, and of course whether they made it to the debut group or not. Moving on to rank 6 and Yeso. It's sad to hear her say that she was having a hard time mentally, although I'm not surprised considering this show. I hope that making the debut group made her feel better. She also gave a good and well-rounded speech as always, and I think she really showed her previous idol experience. She also gets to be the person who makes a mistake in her speech this season. It's sweet that she gave all of the masters a shout out, but I would have felt seriously rejected if I was the master she struggled on the name of. And so this continues on. I feel like Yeso thanked everyone under the sun, and her top 9 experience was possibly why she was able to pick up the top 9 necklace so easily. I would have been petrified of dropping it. Also, I am now wondering why they didn't have top 9 necklaces, or for a more traditionally masculine thing, brooches in the Boys Planet finale. They had them in the main part of the show, and Hanbin even got a special one for being rank 1. So what happened in the finale? Were they worried that people would spend too much time putting them on? Next we get to rank 5 with several shenanigans. First, it was at this point that I noticed how plasticky the cushions on the top 9 chairs look, which no doubt would have been either sweaty or uncomfortable or both. I also thought that the PO5 chair looked a bit wonky, but that could have just been me. Either way, some interesting trainee reactions can be seen with this announcement. First, ironically, Youngin hears, quote, energy that makes everyone happy and shakes her head, saying it can't be her, moments before being actually announced as rank 5. Second, Wonjae looks vaguely scared that it might actually be her. She had probably accepted that she would be eliminated, so this would have been an oddly surprising thought for her to have. Of course, we are shown Gia after Youngin is called, uncomfortably often and for an uncomfortably long period of time, since, well, we know it's just for sympathy points. I reacted to the show and wrote my notes on it around the time Youngin's father had died, so I also wrote that I was glad that her father got to see her debut, and I still am glad. During Youngin's announcement, I also noticed the gaps in paint on Jingu's podium. Whoops, Mnet set designers. Then we're on to rank 4, which was the point where, even more than usual, I started feeling sorry for the trainees who fitted the description that Jingu gave, but who never had any hopes of being called and were only being used as accessories to keep the audience guessing. Like, Jingu says someone is good at both singing and dancing and it shows Suyeon, but Suyeon never had a chance of making it, she was just used so it could be more surprising and dramatic when Daeon was called. They also show Xiaoting for every single rank, and almost every description fits her, so I'm not surprised she started to look more and more depressed as time went on. Mind you, she may well have seen the interim ranks where she ranked way out of the top 9, and may have decided she was never going to make it and was upset that they were getting her hopes up. The camera goes so wild here that it stays on Yujin for so long that she starts to convince herself that she might actually be the one, and the same thing happens with Chaehyun. This is insane. And speaking of Daeon being called, she definitely did not think it was her. And I'm not surprised. This is the effect of the show's emotional manipulation of her in action, plain to see. And of course they mention Ice Cream, one of the most contrived teams in a survival show ever. Unluckily for Daeon, right at the start of her speech, the mic seems to be turned off for some reason, which really sucks. I guess we'll never really know what she said before thank you. On to rank 3, and this time they barely show Yujin, because as always they want to fake us out. Instead, poor Urina and Xiaoting get to be shown and convince themselves that they might debut. Of course, when Yujin is announced, everyone is super happy for her. Almost all of them were probably fans of her beforehand and wanted to see her succeed. I found it very odd and even shady that Mnet mentioned she was the oldest K-group member. Like, why? To show her leadership skills? That has nothing to do with age. At this point, Maya and Yanning seemed to just be having fun, and some of the other girls seemed less depressed than in previous eliminations and more like they were just enjoying it. Hopefully that was because they were just happy that they themselves had got so far, as opposed to being because they were just so dissociated they started to be happy. On to rank 1 and 2. Extra dramatic music, because this is, after all, the glorious rank 1. Of course, Xiaoting gets focused on a lot since she was previously rank 1 and is the only center left on stage. Anyway, as we know, Chaehyun is announced and gets to look happy after being depressed the whole time. At this point, poor Jingu messes up his cards and has to shuffle them around. Were they not in the right order to begin with? Were they not numbered? Weird. At least it's not out of character for him to take forever to announce things. But it is funny that the person in charge of the live stream has to awkwardly shift to a shot of Chaehyun just staring into thin air to hide Jingu shuffling his cards. As we all know, the second candidate, despite the camera focusing a lot on Xiaoting, is Bahie, whose key phrase is that she improved in every performance, which I would say is fair, but I don't know if it applies to Xiaoting, so I'm unsure why they were showing her. That said, others clearly think it does, because you can see Wonji in the background vehemently mouthing Shen Xiaoting over and over. The OT8 sub are fond of saying that when Bahie was announced, the other trainees didn't look particularly excited for her, and honestly, I guess I can see it. There was a lot of hesitation when it came to hugging her, and that didn't happen for other trainees. The thing is, this could be down to tons of reasons. Shock and sadness for Xiaoting, which has nothing to do with whether they liked Bahie or not, and trainees came out after the show to say they did. And even if they hate or resent Bahie for some reason, surely the fact that they couldn't be gracious in their defeat reflects poorly onto them rather than onto Bahie. But the other thing is, I'm lying to you. In the true fashion of an OT8, there were plenty of people standing around and clapping rather than hugging when other members of Kepler were announced. There just straight up wasn't enough space for everyone to hug everyone else. And even more so, some trainees doubtlessly would have felt a bit awkward just standing there while someone else celebrated their debut. And this was the case for all of the contestants, not just Bahie. So there you go, let this be a lesson yet again that what you're told isn't everything, including from me. Let it also be a reminder that everything isn't necessarily the first thing you think of. For instance, let's say you did perceive the trainees to be less happy when Bahie is called compared to other trainees. Keep in mind the things I mentioned earlier: shock, a lack of space, sadness for other trainees, for themselves, and so on. Anyway, the stairs behind Bahie and Chaehyun look super cheap, and you can even see scuff marks on them. Why did some people say they felt like the budget went down for Boys Planet? Those things look like they're made of cardboard. Anyway, both of them give a nice speech, even if Bahie clearly hasn't prepared one in advance. It's also interesting that Bahie, first in 115 countries, was beaten by Chaehyun, who was first in Korea. That, and the fact that, had the votes been weighted equally, Chaehyun would have fallen to rank 9, says a lot about how heavily weighted the Korean votes were. It was also interesting how they took different approaches to this. Bahie was clearly doing her best to show no emotion, while Chaehyun was all about showing as much relief as possible after being announced. They were, however, both upset about the rank 1 announcement being so drawn out, which is fair. I don't think Chaehyun's a very patient person, or maybe she was just annoyed, which is fair. It was also cute to see Shinwei rooting for Bahie. I also found it hilarious that Jingu said the honourable rank 1 to be smiling. Like, both of them will be smiling no matter which rank they end up as. They're both debuting, of course they'll be happy. As I've said many times, now that rank 1 isn't guaranteed to be the centre, there's no difference between rank 1 and 2 from a practical standpoint. Anyway, as we know, Chaehyun is announced to be rank 1 and gives a hilarious "what" gesture to the members sitting behind her. She also gives a nice speech, as does Bahie, as to be expected. And then they both walk up to the top victorious and have the mandatory hugs with their members while other trainees look on sadly from below, and we move on to rank 9. The 3 candidates for rank 9 are Xiaoting, Maya and Suyeon, and Maya and Suyeon look pleasantly surprised that they've made it this far. Considering they got the planet pass, this makes sense. Xiaoting, on the other hand, as many people have pointed out, looks pretty depressed. Whether that be because she knew she would be the only Chinese member, or because she just dislikes Mnet, or because she was just tired and felt like she'd been played, we'll never know, but we do know that she didn't look super excited. Or excited at all, really. There's also this hilarious moment where Ruchi accidentally walks in front of Maya and has to quickly skedaddle. At this point, even though I hadn't watched the whole show, I was just as annoyed as the other people in the chat that there hadn't been a single Chinese member so far, so of course I was rooting for Xiaoting by default. And you can see her talking to the other Chinese trainees in the background who are also no doubt rooting for her. Anyway, at this point it is announced that Maya is rank 11, and genuinely she seems pretty happy about it. She was almost certainly just happy that she'd made it this far after almost being eliminated in the previous episode. She gives a nice cute little speech during which she continues to be happy and thanks everyone, which is nice. And after that, we get even more stressed until Xiaoting is announced for rank 9, to everyone's joy except Suyeon fans and her own. Xiaoting instantly starts speaking in Chinese and instantly says that she was always in the top 3 and was glad to make the top 9, which really just shows how insane her drop was and also how hyper aware of it she was. Other than that, she thanks everyone for their work, which is nice. And we get to see Urina looking seriously depressed and being comforted by Bora as always. Suyeon also gets to give a speech where she proclaims that this isn't the end for her and the other eliminated trainees, and expresses her thanks to the other girls and to the fans for helping her go so far. So that's nice, but also seems to have really set off Mashiro's tears. And then we get the ending of the show where the members of Kepler are introduced to us, and under the confetti we see their final reactions and them descending and everyone hugging and crying, including this uncomfortably long zoom shot of Urina crying while hugging someone. I'm not entirely sure who she's hugging though, I can't really tell from the hair. Is it Mashiro? I don't know. Thankfully, the final shot is a bit happier. It shows Wonjae and Yujin excitedly talking. Goodness knows what about, but at least they weren't crying. And that's it. That's the end of the show. We finally made it after more than 55,000 words. Now let's take a moment to talk about the main storylines that Mnet created and how. So this section is about the major storylines in the show. The way I qualified something as being major or not was by looking at a list of the contestants and seeing whose names I remembered and whose names I didn't remember. Depending on how major of a character they were, I'll be talking about the traits associated with the trainee, the storyline or storylines associated with the trainee, the ways in which these stories and traits were created, and whether or not this trainee was a winner or loser in the Mnet editing system. I'll also be considering which roles the trainee filled for Mnet. For instance, were they a villain, a hero, a nice extra, or an invisible extra? I'll go in order from lowest to highest rank, starting with K group, then C group, and then J group. First up is Lee Ryan, whose final rank was K23 and who was eliminated in the 5th episode and first eliminations. Ryan's story was that she was the one who took on the burden of being the leader and main vocalist for the 5th season Team 2, against Bora, who was the leader and main vocalist of Team 1. This was of course a huge undertaking, especially for someone like Ryan who wasn't known for being a stellar vocalist. Hence, she got an underdog arc, where she has to keep her team together in the face of the far more skilled Team 1. She also, of course, gets criticised in the interim check, since, well, she was never really up to Bora's standard. She gets to cry about struggling to be a leader, and she and her team get to improve. And even though they're criticised for their interpretation of the song, and Ryan makes a mistake with her high note, it's obvious they worked hard. They lose their matchup, Ryan gives a nice speech, and then she gets eliminated. So, traits. She was hardworking and selfless. Her storyline was an underdog storyline which was never resolved since she got eliminated. This was done by editing her in opposition to Bora, and showing her and others often looking nervous when Bora sang. She was neither a winner or a loser in Mnet's system, and she definitely wasn't in their top 9, but she might have made it to their top 28. Next, Seon, who ended up eliminated in episode 5 as K20. Her storyline was that she was a nuisance. She was painted as someone who just can't be a good person at all. She doesn't get involved in practice, she ignores Wonjae when Wonjae confronts her, she seems to blame the other members, etc. She eventually improves a bit, but she still gets criticised after their performance of Yes or Yes. She gets eliminated in episode 5 and looks very sorry about dragging down her cell, especially Wonjae, and seems very excited when Wonjae gets the planet pass for her birthday. So, Seon was painted as someone who was talented but lazy, arrogant and foolish. She was painted as having brought her team down. This was done through various shots of her asking for snacks or otherwise not doing a great job, paired with odd music and her teammates complaining about her. Mnet also clearly manipulated every small thing she did to make it seem like she was a terrible person and undeserving of a spot on the show. This clearly had an effect, and I think it almost single-handedly led to her and her cell being eliminated, especially considering Wonji got far more votes than her and was C11 in that elimination. Xian was definitely a loser in the Mnet system, and was one of the only non-Chinese trainees to be evil edited in any way. She was an evil extra in Mnet's story. They needed to get rid of her so Yeso and Maya had a clearer path to Maknaehood, so they did. She also served a nice role as a mini-boss, essentially, in Wonjae's story, Wonjae being a trainee they liked far more than Xian, kind of ironically considering their xenophobia. Next, Yu Dion, who was eliminated in episode 5 with a rank of K19. She was another one of the few non-Chinese trainees to have a poor edit. Do you notice the pattern here with poor edits and people getting eliminated? That's exactly what Mnet wants. Anyway, Dion is part of the Eve team in the first mission, and starts off seeming determined, but then becomes bitter and lacks confidence as she loses parts she wants. This leads to her seeming jealous of the other team members, and since she says she's on the verge of a breakdown while giving them funny looks which are signalled as funny with weird effects and edits, we see her as a weird person in general. She starts to seem selfish and envious and starts to look like she's dobbing others in, as she complains about part distributions in front of the judges instead of in front of her teammates. Dion even seems ungrateful since she has moved up several parts but wants to go even higher, and in the end the Eve team look confident before performing, which leads to the whole team having a downfall as they lose. Dion gets eliminated and that's it. Dion was painted as someone who was very selfish, envious, and ungrateful, as well as being a generally nasty and insidious person. This was largely done through showing shots of both her and her teammates with zooms, sound effects, and odd music, and also through the judges pointing out how she shouldn't have essentially dobbed the others in. The reason I point this out is because I have no doubt that many situations like this happened on survival shows, as in people not getting the parts they want. We even see it happen often, but this does give Mnet the chance to edit people in either a positive or negative way, and while some people like Suyeon are edited as channeling it into positive energy, others like Dion aren't as liked by Mnet and are edited as being shifty and selfish. She was definitely a loser in Mnet's book, and she definitely wasn't someone they wanted around. Next, Chaeyeon, who was eliminated in the second round with a rank of K18. Interestingly enough, she was pretty close to her signal song rank of K17. Chaeyeon was introduced in the Actor Girls, and in the second round with VVS was the K-group hero to the villainous C-group Lang Zhao, or more like the incompetent Lang Zhao. Zhao wasn't painted as malicious, only unintelligent and incompetent. Chaeyeon was the leader and the most competent member in the group, or at least so the edit suggested. She had to graciously put up with Zhao's antics, keep the group together, and she was the one who improved the most from the interim, where she was criticised, to the actual performance where she had no highlighted mistakes, and thus it seems like she didn't make any mistakes and improved. She was neither a winner or a loser on the show and wasn't given any particular character traits. She just got a mini storyline through the virtue of being in a group with someone who Mnet wanted to paint as useless. Next, Yeyoung, who was eliminated in the second elimination round in episode 8, ranking K17. She didn't have much of a storyline, but was someone who was framed as being able to take criticism well, working to improve herself. She was the pillar of All About You team and was framed as someone who had become an underdog and was being dragged down by the other trainees. In the end, though, she did have several mistakes highlighted in Utopia, while she was still part of that team. It seemed like Mnet was setting her up for an arc where she lost confidence after the first eliminations, then gained it again, but she was eliminated before the end of that arc could actually happen. Yeyoung was someone who was painted as hardworking, humble, and skilled, mainly through Mnet showing her vocal skills and how she held up others in All About You. She was neither a winner or a loser on the show, and had more of an invisible kind of edit. Mnet liked her, or at least they were neutral to her, and she was probably a top 28 kind of person, but no higher than that. Next, Yoon Ji-ha, who eventually ranked K11 after being eliminated in the 8th episode. Ji-ha was introduced with Youngin at the start of the show, and although Youngin was the clear star, and the person Mnet wanted in the group, Ji-ha was also pretty high up on their list, or at least high enough to give a bit of screen time to. She was in Team 2 for How You Like That, where she and Kim Daeon were the main highlighted members that were complimented. Throughout the whole show, Gia was framed in a friendly rivalry with Youngin, but only when Mnet wanted to remind us that she existed. For instance, in the first eliminations, there was a lot of drama about whether she and her cell would be eliminated or not, and of course, Youngin was very happy when they got through. By tying her to Youngin, Mnet suggested that we should be rooting for Gia, although they didn't care as much about her as some others. Gia was in opposition to Chai Bing for the killing part for Salute, and along with the other trainees was involved in Chai Bing's evil edit and the conflict in Salute, although Doa was the main K-group figure there. Gia was highlighted in the actual performance, potentially in a last bid to get her through to the top 28, where Mnet likely wanted her, but she didn't make it, just a few below the cutoff, even with the benefit. In the final episode, she was again shown in relation to Youngin, crying after Youngin was announced as rank 5, which was sad but also nice. Gia was a hard-working and skilled trainee with strong stage presence despite her shy nature. She was mostly an accessory for Youngin though, and was mostly shown when Youngin needed some emotional turmoil or backstory. She was neither a winner or loser, although considering she was an invisible edited accessory to a member of Mnet's desired top 9, I guess you could consider her a loser. Next, Doa, who eventually ranked K10, being eliminated in episode 8. Doa was the face of K-group's grief. She had previously debuted but wanted to try again and was one of the last chance girls. She was always painted as being perfect, which lessened the potential negative impact on her image of speaking out against Chai Bing during Salute. Doa had almost no screen time other than when she spoke out against Chai Bing, and as a well-known K-group trainee showing common sense and speaking out for the supposedly oppressed, no, she was not evil edited Irene Promoter. Doa's most notable edit was during her elimination, where she gave a speech that was edited with lots of sad music and tears to show how sad it was that she was leaving the show, even though Mnet was almost certainly not sad. I think it's pretty clear from the lack of screen time they gave her that they probably didn't even want her to get into the top 28, and were happy with her being eliminated when she was. The only thing they had left to do was to use her to pull on people's heartstrings, and then emotionally manipulate her by hinting that she might get the planet pass before giving it to Suyeon, the intended recipient anyway. Doa was someone who was seen as kind and talented, but she really was too boring for Mnet to do much with outside of Salute. She didn't have any particularly exciting editing outside of the aforementioned sad music and shots of others crying during her elimination, and her being the face of the Last Chance girls during her introduction. She was a kind of loser on the show in the same way that Gia was, an accessory for drama and for Chai Bing's evil edit, and otherwise invisible. Next, Bora. I don't have much to say about her. She was always shown to be kind, a great leader and vocalist, talented and humble, willing to try new things and challenge herself, sympathetic, and so on. She was one of the angels in the show, and only some of this was down to Mnet's editing. Most of it just seems to be how she was in general. Mostly, she was just given this image through being given lots of screen time and rarely, if ever, being highlighted for negative reasons. Unfortunately for her, she wasn't very interesting, similar to Doa. Kindness just doesn't create drama, and the most drama Bora experienced was having to try rap with We Are. And even that she did a good job with. Bora was definitely an angel for Mnet, and I suppose she was kind of a winner. She got lots of screen time and had a great image, but Mnet didn't want her in the group enough to actually push her, hence she made it to the finale before eventually ranking K09, or P15 overall. Next, Maya, who ranked KO8 or P11 overall. Maya was one of the baby monsters, and after Yeso was probably Mnet's second choice for Mnet. She was introduced as being very young but also very talented, as were most of the baby monsters. She was highlighted in every performance that she was in. She was the centre of Pretty You and was perfectly suited for that concept, leading them to victory. She was then one of Daeon's adoring supporters in Ice Cream and took part in Shoot, where she was the main member to be complimented by the mentors during the interim check. She was given the Planet Pass and showed consistent improvement throughout the show. She was always cute and always doing cute baby things, which of course, as you would expect, made it easy for the fans to baby her, especially in relation to Yoojin, who she seemingly got along with well. Even in the finale, after being eliminated, she seemed positive and excited and cheered up others, which was nice. Can you tell I adore Maya? As I said, I don't think Mnet wanted her in the final group. They wanted her in the finale as a backup to Yeso. She was portrayed by them to be skilled and as bringing joy to others, which is a great trait for an idol to have. She wasn't given tons of screen time, but everything she was given included compliments for her and was positive, either in and of itself or by positively associating her with other popular trainees, like Yujin, Daeon, and Bahie, who she seemed to become close friends with. She, Yujin, and Bahie even made challenges for their songs together when Maya debuted with Odd Youth. At the end of the day, Maya was a desired top 18 trainee for Mnet and was a winner on the show. It made many people like me love her, and she showed herself well. I was genuinely surprised that it took her so long afterwards to debut, but I'm glad she got that break from the public eye. She was on the border of being an angel character like Bora. Next, Suyeon, who ranked K07 and P10 overall, one spot from Kepler. Unfortunate, I guess it has to happen to someone. Suyeon had several arcs over the course of Girls' Planet, and this makes sense, since I think she was one of Mnet's ideal candidates for the group. Suyeon is introduced as an all-rounder in a cell with Shana and Yanning, and in her demo stage performance is given these bright orange pants which help her stand out before Yeyoung and Daeon. Despite being many ranks below them, she is the only one who gets the top 9 sticker and fulfills her introduction as a high-skill trainee. In the first mission, she and her cell go to the Eve, where Suyeon doesn't get tons of screen time but is painted as being far more diplomatic than the aforementioned Yu Daeon, who complains about part distributions, and Suyeon is of course shown to be a good performer. In the second round, she picked No Excuses, which gave her a chance to gain a bigger highlight on stage, and tied her to Hikaru, a popular trainee. In No Excuses, Suyeon and Hikaru got a mini storyline of struggling with Sugoi, who couldn't keep up with them, and Suyeon becomes the leader and is yet again edited as having good delegation skills. She bounces nicely off Hikaru and is kind of like a saviour to the group, despite being given an underdog and lacking confidence arc. She got the bulk of the screen time here since Mnet didn't care about Sugoi and knew Hikaru would rank high. She succeeds where she made a mistake in the rehearsal and is praised by the mentors and Hikaru. Unfortunately for her, she didn't rank high enough to make the cut, but fortunately for her, she got the Planet Pass. This led into a 10 out of 10 quality underdog arc where Suyeon loses confidence after being ranked so low, and gets kicked out of Snake Team only to become the killing part for You Plus Me, gain her confidence back, get revenge on her previous team, and win the round. This took her to the finale and to rank 10, as she said herself, a very good rank. She gave a nice speech encouraging all of the eliminated trainees and ended the show with an almost perfect image. Suyeon was definitely someone who, if not in Mnet's top 9, was in their top 18. She was painted as being skilled and working hard to improve while also suiting various concepts. She got 2 underdog storylines which were designed to boost her to the top 9, first with No Excuses and second with You Plus Me. There was no way for her to fail here. Mnet knew she had the raw stage presence needed for these performances, and since they weren't live, Mnet could manipulate the footage. I already mentioned her fixing her mistake in No Excuses, but if she had made a mistake, I imagine Mnet would just have got her to film it again so they could highlight her improvement. Similarly, in You Plus Me, unless the team seriously stuffed their performance up, they were the clear group to win from a narrative perspective. They had a revenge arc, and they had Youngin, Mashiro, and Suyeon, who Mnet really wanted to highlight to get into the top 9. Suyeon was definitely both a hero in the story of GP999 and a winner on the show. Although she didn't manage to make the final group, she did get the Planet Pass, got lots of screen time and a good storyline, and was given an almost perfect image which led her nicely into Billy. Although I'll always love her in Billy, I'll also always think it was a massive shame that she didn't get into Kepler. Alright, on to the top 9 members of the K group, so get ready for longer stories. Sometimes, maybe. First, Yeso, who was KO6 and PO6. Yeso was introduced as one of the baby monsters and right from the start was the clear candidate for the Mnet of the group. She had experience, was mature while still showing a youthful energy, and was talented and professional. She was highlighted right off the bat, being given a story where she was dependable and a hard-working trainee. who led her group despite hardships. She's put right into the top 9, yet again showing how BS the starting rankings were, may I say, and is happy with her result. Over the whole show, Yeso is bubbly and grateful for everything she gets, which definitely was a good thing for her. She and her cell do fiesta for the first mission, where Yeso and Mashiro are painted as reliable and skilled members in contrast to Jingchao, who consistently brings them all down. I'm still confused why Yeso picked Jingchao in her cell. At the end of it all, they seem to have a friendly reunion, although how much of that was staged, I don't know. In the second mission, Yeso picks Fate and quickly becomes the cute Mnet of that powerhouse team, although she does get slammed in the interims. This starts an underdog arc for her, yet another person with an underdog or improvement arc who by all rights shouldn't have had one. She becomes the main character for her team, who rest on her ability to act and pull off the killing part, and of course she does it well and they get praised. In Utopia, she gets a reprieve and gets to just be a talented trainee who gets to do the killing part, and in the OOO mission she gets a small edit of lacking confidence after losing the killing part to Yujin, and that's it. She was basically a consistently talented member who had occasional lapses in confidence and a singular moment where her raw skill may not have been enough to win. But of course, Mnet made Fate win, which portrayed all of the members, but especially Yeso, in a good light. It seems like whenever Yeso was in danger of dropping, Mnet would highlight her skill and her lack of confidence, and this, combined with her being associated with lots of popular trainees and being babied a lot, encouraged audiences to vote for her as a desirable candidate for Mnet. Yeso was definitely a winner on the show right from the start, where her performances were always high quality, and she was definitely a main character, although not as much as some of the trainees coming up next. I'll say, along with Maya, she was also on the border of being an angel character like Bora. Next, Youngin, who was KO5 and PO5. She was introduced in the demo stage as a kooky trainee with lots of energy, stage presence, and duality. Her variety personality was also highlighted, and since reality personalities can single-handedly take people through these shows, this was great for her. She was in How You Like That Team 1, although she wasn't the main character of that team. In the second mission, she got a highlight of trying something new with My House, and of course was the main character of that team, where she stepped up and showed her vocals. In this team, we had the classic Mnet strategy of an evil Chinese trainee, a heroic Korean trainee, and an invisible Japanese trainee. Youngin was, of course, our hero, a talented trainee who had to deal with the supposed nuisance that was Yale, who took excessive control of the performance, ignored Youngin's suggestions, and made mistakes despite being confident, where Youngin, of course, didn't make any. Of course, most of this was probably just dramatically edited and was nowhere near as bad in real life. Anyway, at the end of My House, Youngin is praised a lot, and even when Yale is praised, she brings it back to Youngin. Youngin then had a similar arc to Suyeon, where she was also kicked out of Snake Team and lost confidence, while also wishing to take revenge on a seemingly manipulative Ruchi. Youngin, like Suyeon, of course, also got a major part in U+Me Team, where she was the main vocalist and got to show off how she really is an all-rounder. She won with that team, of course, and won in the OOO mission, and then she was rank 5. Youngin was portrayed as being a hard-working and talented trainee, and her personality was often highlighted. This was mostly done through giving her lots of screen time and through having the mentors constantly praising her. She also got 2 separate edits where she was the talented hero in the face of evil edited Chinese trainees, which almost certainly brought her up. She was definitely a winner and a hero on the show. She was brought up at the expense of other trainees and made her debut through it. Next, Dion, KO4 and PO4. Oh, Dion. Poor girl. I have talked so much about Dion that my script actively refuses to control plus effort because there are just too many results for it to show. Oh dear. Okay, so on the verge of 17 and 18, Dion joins Girls Planet 999 and is made the center of K group. Good for her. But then she's put in a demo stage group with 2 other trainees, Suyeon and Yeyoung, and Suyeon is given a top 9 sticker, but Dion isn't. This makes her the only one of the 3 original centers to have not been given a top 9 sticker, which understandably makes her upset. Her cell also decides to disband, which makes her feel like she's dragging them down and is undesirable. She ends up in the underdog team of How You Like That, where she is neither the leader nor the killing part, but still gets highlighted by the editing for her leadership skills. At this point, we can gather from her confessionals that Dion is feeling upset, somewhat resentful and downtrodden, and desperately wants to win lest she be eliminated. Little did she and the audience know this was all part of Mnet's plan, and the mentors tell her that they didn't give her the top line sticker because they knew she'd make it regardless. This is manipulative on so many levels. Dion loses all of her confidence, which theoretically will make her work even harder, and partially because she's working harder and partially because the mentors have literally said she's in their final lineup, Dion gets a self-fulfilling prophecy which lets her become better and causes audiences to vote for her. I talked in the previous part about this manipulation and how horrid it was, so see the episode 3 segment of that video for my full rant. Luckily, or maybe unluckily for Dion, she was Mnet's favourite, and they had more in store for her. She went next to Ice Cream Team, where she suddenly became the most skilled trainee on that team and was tasked with taking control, as the leader, the killing part, and the choreographer. This was such a great opportunity for her that I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Mnet staged this whole thing. Even better, Chai Bing was on the other team, with a very talented lineup but lots of conflict in comparison to Dion's team, whose teamwork and trust in their leader can make something amazing out of nothing. This allowed Mnet to edit Dion as the hero to Chai Bing's evil Chineseness, even though they weren't in the same team, and this made Salute's win feel even less deserved, and made the audience feel like Dion was even more deserving of something good and had been snubbed. Next, Dion moves to Snake Team and is again against Chai Bing, but this time in the same team, and she gets to be painted as an amazing leader and, again, the hero to the villain, Chai Bing. Later, when Chai Bing has been eliminated and Ruchi is on her team, she gets to be the poor, flustered Korean in the face of even more Chinese selfishness and conflict, and leads her team to an amazing performance. In Shine, she lacks confidence still, but has been buoyed by her rank rising immensely, and in the end, she, as the killing part of her team, wins and gets to complete the song in the finale, before finally making her well-deserved debut. Or so you would think if you didn't see how much Mnet manipulated her storyline. Mnet portrayed Dion as someone who was constantly experiencing injustices, even though those injustices were manufactured by them for the sake of her storyline. She was someone who was hardworking, a great leader, selfless and kind. All of these traits, although they are no doubt traits she possesses, were massively exaggerated and emphasized by Mnet's editing of her. She was constantly shown in confessionals talking about how she felt less valued than the other centres. She was shown several times in opposition to evil edited Chinese trainees, which brought her up. She was manipulated by the masters and the show alike, and she was always highlighted in performances. Most of all, she got tons and tons of positive screen time. In Ice Cream, she was the saviour of the team, and other popular trainees gushed over how amazing she was, regardless of how much evidence there was or wasn't to back up their claims. Similarly, people in Snake gushed about her in contrast to Chai Bing, and on the day trips she got tons of positive screen time, being the main character of her team as well as the main character of Shoot Team, who talked about how much they loved her and wanted to be like her while they were at her house. Literally everything Dion won or lost was manufactured by Mnet, and almost none of it was of her own making. They even did the closest possible thing to Riggory and showed her just below the cutoff line for the second eliminations, practically guaranteeing that she would survive and thus saving her. There was a saying when the show aired that the show was actually secretly called Dion's Planet 999, and this was definitely true. Dion was the main character of the show, but the sad thing is that while Junghao was the main character of Boys Planet through his own making, Dion's storyline was entirely manufactured. It seriously sucks, because not only did Mnet leave her with emotional scars that likely still exist to this day, but they also left her open to tons of hatred and abuse, especially around claims of favouritism which continued when she joined Kepler and was given lines she wasn't necessarily suited for, at the expense of other members. Mnet wins from this, but I wouldn't really call Dion a winner in terms of Girls Planet. Sure, she got to debut, but was it really worth the trauma and hate? Dion deserved to make it into Kepler, and she should have been allowed to do that through her own skill, or at least with minimal editing, the way several other members did. But by hiding these skills under some of the most unsubtle editing I've ever seen, Mnet hugely invalidated Dion's spot in the group, and I'm outraged on her behalf. Ugh. Enough ranting about Dion. I've been doing this through the entire recap of the show, I feel. Hopefully by now you can understand why and how I'm so upset by this. Let's move on to someone who, while still being edited positively, was far less so manipulated than Dion. Yujin, who was PO3 and also KO3. Yujin was introduced as a skilled and experienced contestant who had been cruelly shunted from her group and was now on her last chance to be on stage. She was consistently painted as a gracious, mature and kind person with a goofy personality, and most importantly, a love of performing so strong that literally nothing could keep her away, including a traumatizing survival show. She was gracious in the face of Yanning's manufactured insults of her, was confident in her skills, and always did her best to help others. Yujin's arc on the show was that her confidence had been torn down, both with CLC's disbandment and with some of the criticisms she got from the mentors. She was the leader for 3 out of 5 of the teams she was in, and took the killing part or other large parts like main vocal often. She was consistently skilled and humble. She cried when winning with How You Like That, and was a supportive and hard-working pillar for Fate, even though that was Yeso's story. Shoot was her story though. She has to take the main vocal and leader positions, and when she and her team are criticised for not working hard enough, she ruins her throat practicing, showing how she is humble, reliable and hard-working. And with a few extra moments of her being nice and motherly to other trainees out of the way, she's in the group. Yujin was the angel of the show, possibly even more so than Bora. She was also one of the main heroes of the show, although she was, of course, secondary to Dion, and was used as a prop for Dion's arc when she and her team went to Dion's house. Most of her arc seems to just be Yujin being Yujin, but by placing her with less skilled trainees for Shoot, Mnet could give her an improvement arc. They also gave her a lot of screen time, both as a contestant in general and in variety segments, where her personality, crucial for an idol, was allowed to shine through. She was definitely a winner on the show, partially because of her own greatness and passion for performing, and partially because she won with how much screen time they gave her. Next, Bahie, PO2 and KO2. Contrary to popular belief, Bahie did in fact get a lot of screen time as far as the average on the show goes, and she did indeed get some great storylines. Mini storylines of course, but storylines nonetheless, and that's more than you can say for most of the people on this show. First, she was introduced with the keyword new trainee, setting her up for a massive improvement arc, and with the introduction of Kai, she now has someone to both live up to and separate herself from. In the first mission, her cell isn't picked, and becomes part of the leftover team for Fiesta. Instant underdog arc, and her crying about her determination to get her cell recognised is some great and sympathetic screen time for her. During the performance and interims, she is given screen time with relatively neutral editing, which is in stark contrast to the rest of her team, whose mistakes are highlighted. This paints her subconsciously as a pillar for her team. Although she didn't take a massive role, she did support people like Miyu, and she consistently executed her parts. Along with Miyu, she was the face of the team's desire to prove themselves after not being chosen. Bahie's screen time throughout the show is largely showing her comforting and helping other people. She comforts Miyu, then supports Dion, then supports and helps Yujin, congratulates and comforts people during the eliminations, and so on. Bahie throughout the show is making friends with people and helping them. In fact, to the point that I can't think of a single negative moment of screen time she got. She was only ever criticised as far as we saw when the entire team was criticised, and otherwise most of the feedback associated with her was positive. And before she's called as a member of Kepler, her key word is that she improved with every performance, which is very accurate and was hinted at from the demo stage. Every single trainee on this show had a strategy, and Bahie's strategy seemed to be to play it as safe as possible, which is very valid, especially considering her supposed lack of confidence at the time. And this paid off. Although she was never one of the best performing trainees on her team, she was never in the worst column after interim checks either. She was always nicely in the middle, including during eliminations, up until her fans freaked out and brought her up to second in the finale. So yeah, Bahie was always shown to be a kind, comforting and somewhat goofy person on the show, and was painted as a hard worker and fast improver who had a lot of potential. This was done mostly through just showing positive screen time for her. She was neither a winner or a loser on the show. She wasn't evil edited or really even invisible edited, but she wasn't given tons of screen time either. She was a borderline angel character like Maya and Sion, and she was definitely in Mnet's top 28, even if that was for no reason other than clout. I also don't think they disliked her in the final group. She wasn't in their ideal lineup, but she was a trainee they probably didn't mind in Kepler, and this was shown when they didn't even give her as few lines as some of her fans claim. She isn't nearly as mistreated as they say. Anyway, enough about Bahie, let's move on to our last K-group trainee. Chaehyun, who ranked PO1 and KO1. If there's a winner on this show, it's her, both in the literal sense that she ranked first and in the more abstract sense of she was a winner on the show. Chaehyun was introduced as a trainee who had just missed out on debut despite being talented, and becomes one of the faces of K-group's hard work and loss of their youth as they train to hopefully debut. She makes a mistake which is barely noticeable in the demo stage, but Mnet of course highlights it, because by showing her in a worse light at the start, they can show how much she improves over time. And improvement is something that the fans like so much that Mnet needs to create artificial improvement for lots of trainees that they like on these shows. During Yes or Yes, she is shown to be a great leader and delegator, and comforted the trainees from other groups, which kick-started Mnet's portrayal of her as a kind, experienced and skilled trainee with great leadership skills. She's then painted as a borderline saviour for My C, and of course does a brilliant job with that, where Mnet starts to highlight her as a brilliant vocalist, clearly one of their favourites. In Utopia, she is criticised and marked as the worst member of the group, which of course kickstarts her improvement, which leads to a far better final product. This was likely the final shove that Mnet wanted and needed to give her to get her to the debut group. She had always been pretty popular since she was cute, kind and talented, but this edit showed how humble and hardworking she was, and was likely partially what propelled her to rank 1 as opposed to being rank 9 earlier. That said though, she actually didn't get a huge amount of screen time on the show, certainly not as much as I would expect from a rank 1 trainee. Instead, she was just mostly associated with other popular trainees and was associated with the heart-wrenching ballads that the fans of the show liked, which of course showed her vocal skills. Chaehyun was definitely a winner on the show. She was given decent screen time, which almost always painted her in a good light, and her mini arc in Utopia came at just the right time, especially since she was also pushed up through Jing Chao being pushed down. She was definitely in Mnet's top 18, although I'm not entirely sure about their top 9, but I'm leaning towards she probably was part of it. Alright, and with that done, let's move on to the C group trainees. I remember far fewer of the C group and J group trainees compared to the K group ones, mostly because the K group trainees got most of the screen time. Although C group definitely got more than J group, considering the huge number of evil edits they ended up with. First from C group is Lang Chao, who was eliminated in episode 5 with a final rank of C20. She didn't have much of a story, but I still wanted to mention her. She was introduced with her twin sister Lang Zhao, and both were painted as unskilled and unintelligent. They seemed to be able to do nothing right. In the first mission, they were in opposite teams for the 5th season, so Mnet highlighted them as rivals, but they weren't the main characters of this story and weren't given that much screen time. There was a little bit of stress in the first eliminations with the thought that they could be separated, and of course they were, but then Lang Chao was off the show and that was it for her. She was definitely a loser on this show. Not only did she not get a lot of screen time, but when she did, it portrayed her, as I said, as unskilled and unintelligent, mostly through Mnet omitting anything vaguely positive about her. Her image and that of her twin sister have been practically ruined by their time on the show from the impressions I get of them. Mind you, the same can be said for many Chinese trainees. Next, Wang Yale, who was eliminated in the second elimination round with a final rank of C13. I've previously mentioned her. She was the villain to Youngin's heroic arc in My House. During My House, she was portrayed to be incompetent, arrogant and unskilled in comparison to Youngin, who was skilled and humble. She is ranked lowest in the interims in comparison to Youngin, who is ranked highest, and to her credit, Yale uses this setback to improve, and Mnet saw it that way too. They used inspirational music and shots of the two practicing together to show that she's supposedly improved, and she expresses her thankfulness to Youngin. I say supposedly because, well, the editing likely made her look worse than she actually was to begin with, and the editing likely made it look like she improved more than she actually did afterwards. The power of editing, people. Yale was definitely a loser on the show. She got almost no screen time, and when she did get screen time, she was borderline villainous. She was an accessory to Youngin's story, and that was about it. Next, Zagoi, who was eliminated in the second round with a final rank of C12. She was in a similar position to Yale. Neither were given much screen time, but the screen time they were given was bad. Zagoi's thing was that she was dragging Suyeon and Hikaru down in No Excuses, and she was an accessory to Suyeon's improvement. That's literally it. Unlucky. Next, Lang Zhao, eliminated in the second round with a final rank of C10, and who was, yet again, given a similar arc to Zagoi and Yale. I discussed her twin earlier and how the two were painted as unskilled and unintelligent, as well as the small rivalry between them and the fears of them being separated. But Lang Zhao lasted longer than Lang Chao, so she got the privilege of being poorly edited even more. Her thing, similar to Yale and Zagoi, was that she was bringing down her team, when she was in the VVS team in the second mission. She constantly asks for breaks or to replay parts of the song, slowing down the team's practice, and this, combined with her teammates giving her looks and the mandatory dramatic editing, shows how annoying she is. I think I heard that she was sick at this time, and of course she didn't understand much Korean, making things much harder for her. So that just shows how Mnet is able to twist something innocent into something malicious. Mind you, she wasn't actually painted as malicious, just unintelligent. Chaeyeon is the hero and the leader, who is also portrayed as the most competent in the group, and Zhao pulls her down so much that she has to get other teams involved to help. This is another example of the C-villain K-hero J Invisible edit. I don't even remember the name of the Japanese trainee in this group. Zhao making excuses at the end of the performance and the subtitles saying that Chaeyeon prevailed makes this seem even worse. Zhao was definitely a loser on this show, and it's good that she was eliminated when she was, because I shudder to think about how Mnet would have edited her in the creation mission. Speaking of, a little bit off script, after Zian left the show, right, a lot of people were very upset that Zhao wasn't brought back to fill up her space, and then, of course, it was uneven between the number of K, J, and C trainees, but they were never going to bring Zhao back because they didn't like her. And they probably didn't care enough to bring another Chinese trainee who could sabotage their Korean Final 9, so they weren't going to give another planet pass to a different C group trainee. Next, Zian, who had a final rank of CO9. She made it through the second eliminations before dropping out of the show for health reasons, hence her final rank. Zian wasn't actually given much of a story. I mostly just wanted to discuss her more. But her not being given a particular storyline doesn't mean she wasn't given character traits. In the connection mission, she became the leader of Yes or Yes Team 2, who overall had far better leadership than Team 1. However, they did have the problem of Seiyin, who I previously mentioned when talking about K-Group. Zian was the leader in Seiyin's team, and although Zian was portrayed as a kind and talented leader and an angelic figure like Bora, even she had to complain about Seiyin. In the first half, I described this moment as being damning for Seiyin, because Zian is, quote, high-ranking, pretty, older, more mature, and the leader, therefore her opinion holds more weight and authority. And this is true. Hence why Mnet probably included it. During the Yes or Yes performance, after Wonjae confronts Seiyin and she starts to get better, Zian is one of the members whose lines are highlighted with good audience reactions. When the team unfortunately loses, Zian gives a graceful speech, which adds to her angelic image. She then joins My C team in the second round, and is one of the vocal powerhouses on that team, and although her vocals are, as always, good, she wasn't the main character of that team. She then is rank 8 and just passes the second eliminations, joining yet another vocal powerhouse team, Utopia, before she leaves the show. Ziyin was an angelic, motherly figure on the show, who was always graceful and talented and showed leadership skills and kindness. She doesn't have a single moment of negative screen time on the show, and clearly gets along well with the other trainees. She was neither a winner or a loser on the show, considering how her screen time was good but little. She was kind of like the Bora of C Group, and she no doubt would have continued to be an angelic figure and would have done wonderfully in Utopia if it wasn't for her unfortunate exit from the show. Ah well. Next, Chai Bing, who was eliminated in the third elimination round with a final rank of CO8, and who was pretty much the opposite of Ziyin on the show. At the beginning of the show, Chai Bing was portrayed as very skilled and was highlighted for her performance, but was also chewed out in How You Like That along with Xiao Ting. The two of them were high-ranking Chinese members who underperformed based on expectations. Chai Bing is given extra criticism and is later shown practicing and improving, which is a good improvement arc. FYI, she seems to have had language issues on this show since other C Group members like Xiao Ting translate for her. In the second mission, she becomes the main character for Salute, for better or worse, and in this case for worse. She's the pseudo-rival of Dion, and both become the leader and the killing part. But while Dion is portrayed as talented and kind, Chai Bing is portrayed as arrogant and commanding. This is primarily communicated through 1. The contrast between the atmosphere of her team and the atmosphere of Ice Cream Team, 2. The dramatic zooms and music she gets, and 3. Her teammates, especially Doa, complaining about her. Chai Bing is even criticised for taking over the performance, despite the fact that Dion took up a larger part of Ice Cream's performance than Chai Bing took for Salute. The fact that her teammates are constantly complaining is probably the biggest problem. It shows how dissatisfied they are with her as a teammate, leader and centre, and this of course paints her in a bad light. The scene in the interims which paints her as horribly arrogant has been proven to have a translation issue and be spliced together from multiple clips, which really just shows the extent of Mnet's evil editing. After all of this, she of course has a bad image on the show, and this is continued into Snake, where she and Dion battle it out for the leader position. And while Dion's team are always shown to be getting along perfectly, Chai Bing's team struggle, which of course paints her further in a negative light. Although she does eventually give the leadership role to Dion, the damage is done, and Chai Bing spends the rest of her time on Girls Planet seemingly being very aware of how far she's fallen. She's very quiet during all of Snake and is subdued during both the second and third eliminations. Chai Bing was painted to be selfish, arrogant, controlling and commanding, rude, manipulative and more over her time on Girls Planet. She was consistently the villain to Dion, the hero, and was constantly compared to her in every way imaginable. These stories were created through splicing different scenes together, omitting times when Dion worked poorly and Chai Bing worked well, using confessionals from other trainees, and, most of all, through the power of juxtaposition and comparison. She was 100% one of, if not the biggest loser on the show. Not only was she evil edited to prop up Dion and was probably eliminated because of that, but I also don't know if her image has ever really recovered from this in the minds of general viewers, and that's sad. Alright, moving on to Xin Wei, who was eliminated in the third elimination round with a rank of CO6. Her first main beat on the show was her calling Jingu ugly in the first episode, which became a running joke for her on the show, but which really just showed how extreme some of the language barriers on this show are. Other than that, she didn't actually get much of an exciting storyline. She, of course, improved dramatically from the demo stage to other stages, and was clearly a salient enough figure that both I and many others remembered her. I say others since a lot of people voted for her, which suggests that she stood out to them in some way. She did get slammed in Shoot's interim check before improving, and she did get eliminated and then be the only person who cried so hard they couldn't give a farewell speech, but those weren't really storylines, not even mini ones. Anyway, Xin Wei was portrayed as someone who was a little goofy, silly, and perhaps ditzy. I wouldn't necessarily call her either a loser or a winner. She wasn't someone Mnet wanted in the group, and they didn't edit her that way either, but they did give her screen time. And since that screen time came with jokes, she was endearing to a lot of people who wanted to see her get better. I think where she ended up, eliminated in the third elimination, was exactly where Mnet wanted her. Next, Jing Chao, who was eliminated in the finale as CO5 and P18. She was edited in Fiesta in the first mission as dragging down her cellmates Mashiro and Yeso, and of course improved in the final performance, but this wasn't an extended storyline. Similarly, she was an accessory to Ye Young in All About You, where Ye Young had to help her, but that also wasn't very exciting. In Utopia, she was painted as letting the team down in a larger way. They all worried about how slowly she was learning the choreography, which of course led to improvement. She was never a trainee who was assigned tons of traits, other than being vaguely annoying and lacking talent and the ability to learn fast, but she was always cute and sweet as far as we could see for the most part. I assume she got that far through the show by being pretty, but I'm also not entirely sure since my perception of beauty has previously been shown to be way off Korean beauty standards. Anyway, I don't think Mnet wanted her in the finale, and they probably wanted her eliminated at the same time as Sin Wei, but she wasn't someone they hated enough to give an actual evil edit, just an incompetent one. She was, similarly to Sin Wei, neither a winner or a loser on the show. I don't think it got her career anywhere, and she wasn't a major loser, but she wasn't a winner either since they portrayed her as talentless. Next, Wonjae, who made it to the finale, eliminated as CO4 and P17. In the demo stage, she botched her vocal part in Helicopter, and after that moved into Yes or Yes, where she was painted as a responsible and sincere person, as she told off Seiyin for letting the team down. She was clearly someone who didn't take any excuses and was more boisterous and assertive than most trainees. This didn't really suit her for the K-pop life, but she always directed her outbursts righteously, or at least this was how Mnet portrayed her through avoiding evil editing her. Probably because she was in the handful of Chinese trainees that they would be okay having in the group. After Yes or Yes, she got one of the best moments on the show where she barely missed out on being in a surviving cell before being given the planet pass on her birthday. This did lead to her having the last choice for the second mission songs, and she was forced to stretch herself and rap as a vocalist. But of course, We Are team got along well, had almost no drama, and seemed to become good friends, which was a great edit for all of them. In Wonjae's case, she showed off her talents and also showed her versatility and adaptability, and her determination to do well and be on stage. This took her quite high in the rankings for the second eliminations, soaring to rank 5, and I think she would have been even in the top 9 by sheer number of votes if this video is to be believed. Then Wonjae moved on to Snake Team, where she took a back seat compared to Dion and Chai Bing, but was popular enough nonetheless to get to the finale. Her main moment in the team was confronting Ruchi about her bad attitude. In the finale, she ranked 17th and seemed satisfied with that, considering she got the planet pass in the first elimination and made it all the way to the finale. You know, I would be happy too if I were her. Keep in mind that, the whole way through the show, she has been continuously having great variety moments both in the variety segments and outside of them, has been kind and helpful, and has shown consistent improvement, so it's no wonder people loved her and voted for her. Wonjae was definitely a winner on the show. I don't think there was any negative footage associated with her, and she got a lot of fans, including myself. And she got a lot of screen time, and with the Planet Pass made it to the finale. She was also one of the few Chinese trainees to not be evil edited. She was another borderline angelic figure on the show, even though she wasn't actually angelic necessarily. She was a positively portrayed trainee. She was mainly given the traits of being funny and loud, which gave her a unique niche on the show, and Mnet probably wanted her exactly where they got her, in the finale but not necessarily in the final group. Next, Ruchi, who was eliminated in the finale with a final rank of P13 and CO3. She was introduced with some relatively neutral editing, probably reflecting how Mnet wanted to see how she was received before editing her more harshly, either positively or negatively. She was received poorly by lots of people and started threatening both the positions of Korean trainees in the top 9 and Xiaoting, their favourite Chinese trainee. So the evil editing started. In The Eve, she was given a minor edit of being obsessed with the part distributions and potentially arrogant. I think it's pretty clear what was happening here, although of course I may still be wrong. I think that Ruchi was, as an older trainee who also had tons of experience and was on her last chance, more confident and assertive, which made it easy to edit her as arrogant beyond her skills, especially in comparison to Xiaoting, who is hyper-feminine, demure and quiet. This made Ruchi seem worse by comparison, and of course any potential outbursts or even questionable words could be taken out of context when Ruchi had such an arrogant image. This is something that could well have happened to Wonjae, but like I said, Mnet liked Wonjae and so did the audience, and she was often by herself. But Ruchi was involved in more conflict, especially with desired Kepler members and especially with Dion. Hence, she was brought down. Although she didn't have a huge role in Fate, she did have one in Snake, where she seemed to be manipulating her teammates into picking her over Youngin for main vocal, and then when she was switched with Yanning, she started complaining and not practicing. Apathy and not practicing are some of the most egregious things trainees can do on these shows, and fans take it seriously as bringing the team down, so this obviously wasn't a good look for Ruchi. I'm genuinely kind of surprised that she got through after this edit, but throughout the whole show she had been a divisive figure, with people absolutely loving her and other people convinced that she should be boycotted. So I guess this wouldn't have turned off any of her fans, especially considering after Chai Bing they would have been hyper aware of any potential evil editing. Ruchi, as I said, was someone who was seen as confident to the point of arrogance, and in Snake, immature and unhelpful. I would probably say she was a loser on the show because of the effect the evil edit had on her image, but really, as far as Chinese trainees go, she came out of the show relatively well off. Mnet used a lot of comparisons to edit Ruchi poorly and also used her pre-existing personality to encourage the audience to make unfavourable assumptions about her, especially by removing context. Next, Yanning, who was eliminated in the finale with a final rank of CO2 and rank 12. I still find it insane that CO2 didn't get to debut. Yanning was the first real villain of the show. She was introduced insulting other people and especially Yujin, who, as I already mentioned, was an angel on the show. However, after her obviously forced diss of Yujin in the first episode, she was given a far more well-rounded storyline and arc. This continues in The Eve, where the weird editing with sound effects and such paints her as strong-arming her way into becoming the leader, and she seems like a very scary person who also potentially gets her just desserts, as she is criticised in the performance. After that, she moves on to Mafia in the Morning, where she is still painted as somewhat of a sinister figure, with the implication that she knows what it's like to be spiteful, but really here she's just an accessory to Mashiro. In Snake, she is offered the main vocal position after Ruchi does poorly, and now becomes, in a way, another victim of Ruchi as she looks scared and chooses her words carefully to make herself seem as non-threatening as possible. In the end, she is criticised for being greedy, oddly considering she was literally offered the part, and is highlighted as making several mistakes during Snake and the OOO mission. At the end of the show, it's clear that she's become friends with Yujin and others, and that she and Maya are two of the people in the finale who seem convinced that they're not in the debut group and instead just enjoy themselves. Most of this editing was done poorly. I have no clue how or why people thought that Yanning was actually a terrible person and hated Yujin at the start of the show. At the start of the show, she's shown fangirling over the Masters just as much as everyone else there, and when she disses Yujin, it is so insanely obvious from her facial expressions that she's uncomfortable. She literally looks like someone's holding a gun to her head, and yeah, Mnet kind of were. She's seen checking up on her teammates both before and after the performance, laughs with the Masters and gives them finger hearts, likely to break up the tension of her pseudo-insults of Yujin, and she smiles sweetly in general. When receiving feedback for her demo performance, her facial expressions to me look like she's trying to encourage Juhi to continue speaking, since Juhi's pauses are odd and potentially even staged. But of course, Mnet uses Yanning's sharp features and image to make it look like she's arrogant and disrespecting Juhi, even when it's obvious after the performance that she's a sweetie on the inside. At every step of the way, Yanning's facial expressions betray her real personality, despite Mnet's editing, hence why I'm so confused about why they even tried to edit her poorly and why the audience believed it. After the demo stage, she's clearly just more experienced, older, and more confident than many of the other trainees, traits shared by many other Chinese trainees, and these traits allow Mnet to edit her poorly. It was a bit odd how they started to portray her in a more positive way as the show went on, but still made sure to point out all of her flaws, even ones of their own creation like her supposed greed during Snake. I think she ended up exactly where they wanted her, A Chinese contestant in the finale who didn't have enough Korean support to actually join the group, but who would stress out audiences because of her potential inclusion and therefore make them vote for more Japanese and Korean contestants. Although she was far from the greatest loser on the show, I would still say Yanning was a loser. Everything she said and did was criticised and was often edited in ways that took it out of context in a way that made her look bad. I feel like her image was kind of ruined, and although she did get to the finale and made lots of fans, I don't really think it was worth it. She was one of the people who was pseudo-rigged out of Kepler because of the 50-50 Korean to international voting system, so I wouldn't blame her if she did feel some level of bitterness or resentment about it. Finally, Zhao Ting, who was the literal only Chinese member to make the group, with a final rank of CO1 and PO9. Zhao Ting was another borderline angel on the show. She wasn't actually angelic as such, and unlike other angels, had flaws, but she was a trainee who was almost never properly criticised, and was always talented, loved, and portrayed in a positive way. Right from the start, she was portrayed as an incredibly skilled and humble trainee, who could do a bit of everything, including leadership, but who was best, of course, at dance, and is, as emphasised throughout the whole show, very pretty. In the demo stage, she was the only member of her team who was highlighted in a positive way, and as I said, it was obvious that she was paired with lower ranking trainees and given a song and outfit that suited her, not them, to help her stand out more. She was praised by her groupmates and the judges alike for her leadership and general skills, and of course was a top 9 candidate. Then she moves on to How You Like That, where she and Chai Bing are criticised for being high-ranking trainees who underperformed. This was a good edit for Zhao Ting since 1. It showed that the judges had high expectations for her, which implies she is a strong performer. 2. We get to see her translating for Chai Bing, which shows both her willingness to help others and her mastery of Korean. And 3. By criticising her, Mnet can imply an improvement arc even if she was already at the top. Hence, they portrayed her as someone who works hard and takes criticism well. I'd also like to circle back to this translating thing. Zhao Ting seems to have had a better understanding of Korean than many of the other Chinese trainees on the show, and this is almost certainly one of the reasons she reached the final group. This meant that she was able to communicate with her teammates better, was able to understand and thus work on things faster, and since she already knew Korean, Mnet would be more likely to 1. Select her for the show, 2. Select her for CO1, and 3. Favour her through editing for the final group, since it of course benefits them to have a group where all of the members can communicate. Zhao Ting also delivered many of her acceptance speeches partially or fully in Korean, which endears her to a nationalistic Korean audience. This phenomenon can be seen with Japanese trainees too, where those who seemingly understood Korean better on average went higher in the ranks, but it is more exaggerated for Chinese trainees who had more to gain and lose with their more extreme edits. Anyway, back to Zhao Ting. Of course, she improves in How You Like That, and of course we have the start of Zhaorina and their child Youngin, probably the best sell on the show. After How You Like That, Zhao Ting moves to Fate, where she has to take a backseat to Yeso. This makes sense, since as CO1 and in the last eliminations, PO2, Zhao Ting was practically guaranteed to make the group, and Mnet could ease off on her editing to focus on people they needed to push more, like Yeso. However, she was the leader for that team. Zhao Ting and Yujin were together a lot, and they switched leadership each time, which I found interesting. After Fate, Zhao Ting moved on to Snake, where she again had to take a back seat because Dion was with her in the team, and the Dion Richie Chai Bing drama was more important. That didn't mean Zhao Ting got no screen time though. She was praised for her performance, and she was often shown to be a mentor to Dion, which painted both of them in a good light. It showed that Dion wasn't arrogant to the point of not asking for help, and it showed that Zhao Ting was a kind and experienced person to the point that she would become a mentor for Mnet's favourite. After this, Zhao Ting did the killing part for Shine, although she did lose to Dion and her team, and then continued to lose as she was rank 9 and the only Chinese trainee in the group. Like I said, Zhao Ting was a borderline angelic figure on the show, without a shred of negative screen time. She was shown to be incredibly competent in literally everything except for confidence levels, and had a great attitude and demure personality, crucial for a girl group member especially. She was pretty and talented, and the show shows this, to the point where Mnet didn't even feel the need to give her good edits, They clearly knew that a bit of screen time here and there and being praised in performances would give Xiaoting what she needed to make the group after the initial improvement edit. I'm not sure whether to call Xiaoting a winner or loser on the show. On one hand, she made it into the group, and this no doubt gave her far better career prospects than what she would have had otherwise. On the other hand, she was part of the most hated and marginalised group on the show, and in the end got to suffer while also watching her fellow groupmates suffer, and became isolated in the group as the only Chinese trainee and the only survivor of Mnet's xenophobia, which must have been pretty depressing. The only saving graces of Xiaoting being the only Chinese member are: 1. She still seems to be friends with other C group members and eliminated trainees like Yurina. 2. She no doubt had at least one friend in Kepler, likely Youngin or Yujin. And 3. She may still have been able to hear a bit of Chinese not out of her own mouth, as Bahie reportedly speaks a bit of Chinese. Still pretty depressing though. Okay, now on to our final group, the J group. The J group were the ones who were often invisible edited or just invisible in general, which led to a lot of them being disproportionately eliminated after cells and the group voting system were disbanded. I wanted to give an honourable mention to some trainees whose names I did remember, but who didn't actually get storylines really. First, Nagami, who was eliminated at rank J21 in the first eliminations and who was an accessory to Mashiro in the demo stage. Next, Itamiyu, who was eliminated in the first eliminations with a rank of J19, who took on the role of Fiesta Team 2's main vocal where no one else would. She kind of got a storyline and was one of the main characters of Fiesta Team 2, as her vocal cords gave out during the performance and she got to suffer the guilt that followed, but it unfortunately wasn't enough to get her through the eliminations, and didn't actually paint her in a particularly positive way despite her immense suffering, selflessness and hard work. Thankfully for everyone like me who appreciates her, it seems like she was able to join Maiden and Limelight, despite those groups also potentially being doomed. Next, Ayana, who was eliminated in the second eliminations at J12, who I don't think had a storyline, but who was the third member of My House after Yale and Youngin, getting the traditional Japanese invisible edit. Next, Kotane, who was eliminated in the third elimination round, ranking J09 and P25. Or P24 if you consider that she ranked 24th and Maya, who was 25th, was given the Planet Pass. Kotane's main screen time in the first half of the show was being shown as rank 9 before the second eliminations, the same way Dion and Shinwei were. She had been in Boombaya, where she was an accessory to Hikaru, Pretty You, where she was an accessory to Maya, and VVS, where she was an accessory to Chaeyeon. In VVS, she did rap about not getting screen time, but ironically, that didn't lead to her getting much more screen time. However, I do think that Mnet wanted Kotane about where they got her, eliminated in the third eliminations. Hence, they showed her at rank 9 in an attempt to move her up, and they gave her the Planet Pass when this method didn't succeed. Kotane's Planet Pass was emotional, but considering she'd barely had any screen time and no storyline previously, it was a bit unexpected. After the Planet Pass, she moved on to You Plus Me before getting eliminated. Next, Mei, who was eliminated in the third eliminations with a rank of J09, P23 overall or P22 before Maya's Planet Pass. Mei was a borderline angel on the show in that she didn't have any negative screen time. However, she did barely have any screen time to begin with. She was in Yujin's cell and that was about it. She didn't get a single storyline on the show, but did do well in her performances and seemed to, like Bora, be a borderline motherly figure for some of the trainees. Next, Rivika, who was eliminated in the third eliminations with a rank of J07 and overall P21 or P22 after Maya. She was in Ice Cream as an accessory to Dion and in Shoot as an accessory to Yujin, and I think I only remember who she is because I remembered her name from her being promoted in the demo stage as having been on the Nizi project. But even then, she was an accessory to Yurina and she probably only made it so high with her Nizi project fans, considering her lack of screen time. Now we finally move on to the Japanese trainees who actually kind of had storylines. And yes, it is insane that only the top 6 Japanese trainees had a storyline of any substance. Actually insane. I can't explain this in words. I'm losing it. At the end of the day, I kind of wonder whether the C group or the J group were bigger losers on this show. C group were evil edited, but J group got literally nothing. Anyway, on to the actual trainees with storylines. First, Manami, who was eliminated right where Mnet wanted her in the third elimination round with a rank of J06 and an overall rank of P20, or P21 after Maya. Manami got no screen time during the demo stage in the first mission, where she was in the 5th season and pushed aside for Bora versus Ryan and the twins versus each other. She was given her first and only real storyline in We Are, where she struggled a lot with writing lyrics in Korean, and where the whole group struggled with rapping. This was one group where almost everyone was given an equal storyline, which I really liked. Bora was shown helping Manami write, and the 3 members worked to encourage each other. This leads to Manami being praised during both the interim and the actual performance, and she benefits from the traits which are associated with the whole team. For instance, loving performing and being humble and kind. This boosted her up to being J05 in the second eliminations, and she then moved on to Shoot Team, where she unfortunately took a backseat to Yujin, probably one of the reasons she ended up being eliminated in the third eliminations. The show, through highlighting her and her skills, implies that she was a consideration for the Planet Pass, but of course Maya gets it in the end, and the other trainees, especially Bora and Wonjae, are shown to be sad about Manami being eliminated. Mnet had a really interesting decision to make here, where they could have made Manami on the beat a catchphrase the same way Young and Rich, Tall and Handsome and Yusarang and Aisarang became catchphrases that embodied trainees. But they didn't like her enough and didn't want her in the group, so they had no reason to push it. Even though 1, the other trainees pushed it anyway, and 2, had she made it into Kepler, Manami on the beat would have been an epic rap signature in line with Hongjin laughing and Minky saying "Fix On." I desperately wish to see more of Manami in the future, and I, along with many others, was really drawn to We Are Team in general and their storyline. Now, the storyline was manufactured, they would always have improved and always would have given a decent performance, and Mnet edited the performance like it was better than it probably really was, but even doing my best to ignore the messages the editing is trying to send, the way they all worked together to prop each other up and challenge themselves was amazing, and I wish the best for all 3 members. They were definitely my favourite team on the show. Alright, moving on. Ran, who was eliminated in the third elimination round with a final rank of J05 and an overall rank of P19, or P20 after Maya. Ran, who likely ended up exactly where Mnet wanted her, had a story that was all about confidence, with the caveat of being an accessory to others. In the first mission, she needs to gain confidence in her cuteness for Pretty You, which she does, but she is an accessory to Maya. She then gets the Planet Pass in the first elimination round, where she is sidelined for Wonjae's Planet Pass story, and she then moves on to Ice Cream, where she needs to gain confidence back after getting the Planet Pass, and becomes an accessory to Dion's story. Ran does get to improve and gain confidence, and she does of course get praised at the end of the performance, but this is largely just so that our amazing, godlike leader Dion can stoop to help those beneath her and sacrifice her time to help the lowly Ran. Despite the fact that this story was clearly just to help Dion, it does make Ran a sympathetic figure, which helped her survive the next elimination round, at which point she joins Shoot Team and becomes an accessory to Yujin. Her main moment of screen time here is her saying that the members are the problem with the team, not Yujin. In the third eliminations, Mnet teased potentially giving Ran the Planet Pass again, saying that she has the potential to join the debut group, which... no, she doesn't. She's a Japanese trainee with almost no story. She doesn't have enough fans, and she certainly doesn't have enough Korean fans to beat out Xiaoting, Hikaru, and Mashiro. Anyway, Mnet used their editing to portray Ran as someone who was hardworking but also lacking in confidence to an extreme and crippling degree, making her almost pathetic. She, like many of the other Japanese trainees, was used to prop up Korean trainees. Hence, I would probably say she was a loser on the show, although she was one of the ones who lost out less, since she did get a good number of fans, made it decently far into the competition, and did debut in Genies, the group made out of Trang, Asia, Thailand, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. Is it Genies or Genius? Ran ranked second on that show. Next, Shana, who was eliminated in the finale with a final rank of J04 and P16. After Hikaru, she was the second most highlighted member of the Boombayah team, and was also praised during the eve in comparison to her teammates like Richie and Yanning. But neither of these were storylines. However, Mnet did like her, and she was one of their main Japanese picks to have in the group, and one of their options for main vocalist, hence she needed an edit. So in my C, she was downtrodden and lacking confidence, only for her to of course do an amazing job and even potentially beat out her teammate Jiyun. She then survived but lost her confidence again when she was pushed out of Utopia team and had to join U plus me equals love. She then had the classic lacking confidence arc, where she was unconfident after her experiences but was praised by the judges and shown to be talented and sweet. Gaining her confidence back as the group performed well, she was praised and the group won that round. This was a storyline that she shared with a few members of the group, primarily Suyeon. But it was still a storyline that Shana had, and it helped her stay relevant. Anyway, after all of that, she ended up in the top 18, probably where Mnet wanted her. I don't have much to say about Shana, just as I don't have much to say about most of the Japanese trainees. She was portrayed as someone who was incredibly talented and kind but lacked confidence, and although she didn't have any particularly exciting storylines and often took a backseat compared to others, even in my C, her storyline was relatively generic. But her skills and her cute visuals appealed her to many people, including me. Hence, it's no surprise that Mnet liked her and she made it so far. I'd say she was a little bit of a winner on the show, not a lot, just a little bit, but she was positively portrayed, made it far, and it set her up nicely for a career in Lapillus, even if Lapillus aren't super popular. Next, Urina, who ranked 14th in the finale with a final group rank of JO3. Urina was highlighted right from the demo stage, and similarly to many trainees on this list, had a lacking confidence edit and underdog arc, which by all means she should not have had, being as high-ranked and loved as she was. After the demo stage, Urina is in a cell with Youngin and Xiaoting, hence Xiaorina and their child. They join How You Like That, where Urina takes a supportive role in Xiaoting's storyline and is often seen by her side. This leads her to rank first in the first eliminations, which she is obviously shocked at. Similarly to Shana, Urina was one of Mnet's backup Japanese trainees after Mashiro and Hikaru, so this rank 1 allowed them to get her a nice storyline in Missing You, where she really was the main character. She was painted as someone who was kind, demure, skilled, and above all beautiful, and at times carefree. This allowed her to have a fall where she became uncertain and needed to grow into her rank 1 position and mega popularity. This started when she is criticised heavily and told she is bringing the team down in the interims, and then of course she works on improving before she is praised after the actual performance. Everyone else on this team is just an accessory to her improvement, and even she kind of is. This storyline was so insanely manufactured by Mnet. If they get the judges to tell someone they're bad, that person will work hard, will improve, and will obviously do better in the actual performance, at which point the judges can praise them and they can be seen to be, quote, doing better. Urina of course deserved the screen time, but it's so funny how staged this all is. Since she'd had her main storyline and was doing well in the ranks, she doesn't get much screen time at all in Utopia and afterwards, which might have contributed to her downfall. She was mostly just shown in combination with Xiaoting and was shown to be comforting other trainees. Urina was another angel on the show and could do no wrong. I've talked before about how she fills a weird niche on survival shows with a bookish image, which I've literally never seen before. She was a great contestant, but unfortunately was just too straight-laced to attract enough audience interest to make the group. Overall, I would say she's a winner on the show. She gained tons of fans and interest and showed herself to the world well, which led to her solo debut. Unfortunately, that solo debut wasn't super popular and she hasn't released anything in almost a year and a half, but I hope that Girls Planet opened at least some doors for her, or if nothing else, gained her a bunch of friends. Now onto the debuted Japanese contestants. First, Mashiro, whose final rank was PO8 and JO2. Mashiro was highlighted right from the start and instantly started winning, although not really with a storyline of her own. In Fiesta, she was somewhat secondary to Yeso. While both Yeso and Mashiro bore the brunt of Jing Chao's lacking skills, Yeso was the one who was highlighted. Mashiro was still a dependable leader and led the group to victory for the first time. She also gave speeches in Korean, which is always a good thing. In Mafia in the Morning, Mashiro is yet again the leader and is painted as a poor cute Japanese girl who's scared of yanning. The group also get criticised for their execution of the concept, but of course they do well in the actual performance, hence reflecting well on Mashiro's leadership and being the second time she wins as a leader. She's highlighted for her intelligence, kindness and versatility, all important things to highlight for the audience. After that, Mashiro leads U plus Me team to victory, although she doesn't get highlighted compared to people like Suyeon and Shana, and we don't really get to hear from her in the OOO mission either. Most of the rest of her screen time on the show is just showing her being nice to people, apart from in Shine, where she gets a story about having to sacrifice for the good of the team, and thus lacking confidence. This leads us nicely into her emotional response when she's announced for the group. Mashiro was yet another angel character on the show and was almost certainly someone Mnet wanted in the group. They only gave her positive edits and screen time, and even when she didn't have storylines, she was complimented, shown doing nice things for people, or was mentioned positively by other trainees. She was also very cute and relatable, and since that suited the image of Japanese trainees on the show, it worked well for her. She was definitely a winner on the show. Both the show and her time in Kepler gave her a very solid foundation for a later career, whether that be in Maiden or elsewhere, and I think she's opened doors for herself, especially since she was also Kepler's co-leader. Alright, last trainee. Hikaru, whose final rank was JO1 and PO7. Oddly enough, she didn't really actually get a storyline in any of her groups. She just got tons of screen time and praise from the judges. She was highlighted in the demo stage as being humble, having good leadership skills, and being a great performer. She was also continually advertised with that classic duality, a badass on stage and a sweetie off stage. She also gave her speeches and learnt rap in Korean, which was highlighted on the show and, as I've said before, is a great move for promoting her to Korean audiences. Her first major highlight or mini storyline was in No Excuses, where she backed up Suyeon in being annoyed with Sugoi, and she was told that she wasn't versatile enough before improving. And that was about it. She was praised in Snake along with Daeon and Xiaoting, but other than that, her only screen time was in bits and pieces as opposed to a storyline. It seems that, unlike with Daeon and Xiaoting, Mnet were convinced that Hikaru would get in regardless of what they did, so they left her be, and it worked. Hikaru may well have been the biggest winner on this show. She was given JO1, she never fell out of the top 9, and she was able to demonstrate her skills well while being positively edited by Mnet, and while making it into the final group anyway. In Kepler, she has always been well loved, well highlighted, and well appreciated by the company and fans alike. And in their most recent album Tippy Tap, she had the most lines in the album, being given more singing lines than usual in addition to her rap. So good on her. And she's continued to be a sweetie the whole time. Her charisma is limitless. I could praise her for a long time, but I think you get the idea. She had a bit too strong of an image to be an angel on the show, but she was pretty close. Now that we've discussed the trainees, let's quickly discuss the main differences the show had from Boys Planet and how this season was experimental. Now, I also wanted to discuss the differences between GP999 and Produce, but I haven't actually watched Produce yet, so I can't really. However, I have got the impression, both from its general structure and how people react to it, that Boys Planet is quite similar to Produce, certainly and unsurprisingly more similar than Girls Planet. So I'm going to hesitantly assume that the differences between Girls Planet and Boys Planet are similar to the differences between Girls Planet and Produce. This was interesting. Girls Planet served two experimental purposes. First, it was supposed to distance the Planet series from Produce. This means that after the first season, Mnet could return to a formula closer to Produce with Boys Planet, and audiences would be less likely to know or care, as opposed to if they had come right out with a Produce clone, when the rigging was still relatively fresh in the minds of the public. The second purpose was to lead the way for the return of Produce with Boys Planet, through testing the waters, taking all of the blame and hate before the beloved boy group came in, and through making lots and lots of money which could be used for Boys Planet and Zero Base One. This means that we see a return to Produce with Boys Planet, making Girls Planet well and truly the ugly duckling of Produce. So first, the multiple groups. Mnet needed to distance Girls Planet from Produce, and what better way to differentiate the new show from the Korean show than with non-Koreans? Hence the 3 groups. This was changed in Boys Planet. Boys Planet went with 2 groups instead, just Korean and Global, and this had several advantages. First, it was easier to categorize than 3 groups, and second, it allowed ethnically Korean international members like Matthew, who would have been put in the K group if the structure was like Girls Planet. Third, it tied Boys Planet to Girls Planet rather than to Produce, since the group structure was expected by fans. And finally, it meant that there was less expectation for global trainees. Having 3 groups in Girls Planet meant that audiences expected, at least subconsciously, an equal divide between the 3 groups in the finale. Hence the anger when only 3 global trainees made it in. But in Boys Planet, 2 groups meant a maximum of 4 trainees could really be expected to be global, since Koreans will obviously have dominance, and since 4 is less than 6, Mnet gets less backlash when there were only 3. Not that they probably cared that much about backlash, but still, it suited them better. Next, the signal song ranks. In Produce and Boys Planet, trainees are ranked during and after the demo stages, but on Girls Planet, the trainees were ranked right off the bat. This instantly distanced the show from Produce, but also helped demonstrate how terrible the numbered ranking system was. It caused stress for fans and trainees alike and wasn't even accurate, as some people with high ranks weren't top 9 candidates and some with very low ranks were top 9 candidates. For instance, Chai Bing rose 27 ranks from the signal song to the first eliminations, which is insane. Next, the judges' top 9. This didn't happen on Boys Planet, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe just because of the different ranking systems, and because while on Girls Planet the trainees came to the demo stage knowing the signal song, in Boys Planet they didn't know about it, and it was its own mini mission. Also on Boys Planet we returned to the Produce formula of trainees being introduced by company group, not in random groups. Next, cells. This was clearly a very experimental and clickbaity move for Girls Planet, and obviously didn't return for Boys Planet, since it was 1, not part of Produce, and 2, had received backlash. The cells also led to group-based voting, where for instance in the second elimination there were a certain number of places allocated to each group. I think Mnet decided that this was useless and disadvantaged the K-group trainees who they like, hence in Boys Planet this was removed, which meant that a larger number of global than Korean trainees were eliminated right off the bat. Speaking of eliminations, in Girls Planet the surviving members were announced first and then the top 9. This meant that the announcement of the top 9 held next to no suspense in the first few eliminations, since we already knew who had survived. On Boys Planet this was changed, and the top 9 members weren't announced from the trainees sitting down until just before the final position was announced. This meant that trainees often had to guess whether they would have been able to make it to the top 9 or whether they would be going home. And obviously most of the time we knew who the top 9 were, but it still created more suspense. Also, announcing people from each mission group caused more stress, since not all of the chairs were filled at once, it just spread everything out a little bit more. Next, the connection mission. On Girls Planet this was done through matching cells, so trainees from all 3 groups performed in them, but on Boys Planet the 2 groups were against each other. This could have created a more nationalistic approach and definitely put the K group firmly on top, especially with the new live audiences who were biased in their favour. I have no clue what Produce did. Speaking of the live audiences, Girls Planet was filmed during COVID, so didn't have any live audiences even in the finale outside of the eliminated trainees, and judges chose all of the winning teams. This nicely allowed Mnet to use which team had won to tell a story, while on Boys Planet the winning teams were entirely based in audience votes, and as I said, the audiences were biased towards K-group trainees and of course towards debuted idols like Hui. Finally, the finale and finale songs. Not only did Girls Planet have a far smaller budget and less dramatic finale than Boys Planet, it also had Shine. I'm not entirely sure how this was done for Produce, but with Shine on Girls Planet the 2 teams picked their positions and the judges picked which team would win. However, on Boys Planet, not only did the audience pick the killing part, not the judges, but the finale also had 2 stages, one for each of the team. This helped each trainee get a bit more time to shine, and both Hot Summer and Jelly Pop were received better than Shine by fans. All of these differences meant that Boys Planet was 1. Closer to Produce and thus more nostalgic for those who had watched Produce, and 2. Was far more refined and polished than Girls Planet, with a better relationship with fans and general audiences, a more refined structure, and less extreme angel and evil editing. It also meant that Mnet and audiences were both aware of the failings of the 50-50 Korean international system, and thus could play around it. Mnet through highlighting vocalists, and audiences by refusing to not vote Matthew and Ricky into the group. This meant that Boys Planet is a better run show in general, arguably, and also that it was perceived better by audiences, which just shows that even if Girls Planet was kind of a failure, it also succeeded in really its only purpose, to make Zero Base 1 as big as possible. Which I just find really interesting, especially since we're getting a second season of Boys Planet before a second season of Girls Planet. See my Kepler Renewed minisodes for more specific details about my thoughts on the future of Produce. I personally really like the use of cells and the Planet Pass, and I thought it was a shame that they didn't come back for Boys Planet, especially the Planet Pass. I thought the cells were fun and interesting, and it was nice to connect the girls by a key word, but I mostly just think that the Planet Pass is good. It gives Mnet and the judges a tiny bit more control over the eliminations, and that's never something I would expect them to sacrifice. I wonder why it wasn't continued. Speaking of cells, I also like how Girls Planet had even spots for all 3 groups, and I also preferred how Girls Planet has the groups working together for the first mission rather than opposing each other, and I think that's a pretty common opinion, so I imagine for Boys Planet 2 we might see the return of cross-group first missions, especially with the twin concept. However, I did prefer Boys Planet's use of the 2-group system, not 3 groups, and the use of the star ranking system and announcements for the top 9. I also thought the use of 2 songs in the finale, not 1, was better. I also preferred the use of a live audience, which of course spiced things up more. However, this does need to be handled carefully since Korean versus global voting will always leave Korean people on top. Overall, the one thing I would change for both shows, which I'm pretty sure isn't a controversial opinion, is removing the 50-50 ratio on Korean and international votes. It's pretty ridiculous, but I know that that and my other wish to remove minors are never going to happen, so rip me. Now let's take a look at the final segment of this video, key takeaways from the Planet series and other notes. I'll discuss a few things here. What to do about the show, the implications and takeaways, the show's legacy and impact, and the things that I learned and that you should probably learn too. First, what to do with the show. I mean, it's a pretty mediocre show, all things considered, and it was really upsetting at the time that it came out and continues to be upsetting to this day. I genuinely don't know what to do with it, other than to support the trainees and keep in mind the hubris that trainees and audiences alike experienced while on Girls Planet. Don't think your pick is safe, always vote for your one pick, don't underestimate the power of the 50-50 ratio, etc. So speaking of key takeaways. Girls Planet was the first time an international audience could vote as far as I'm aware, and the 50-50 system really screwed some trainees over. Hence, we learned a lot about survival shows, including the above advice about always voting for your one pick, not underestimating the 50-50 ratio, and not assuming your pick is safe. In line with this, we also learned that the top 9 will change drastically over the course of the show, but especially in the final episode where filler picks are eliminated. We also learned that Mnet are incredibly xenophobic and biased towards Koreans, and that this bias, the editing, and the 50-50 ratio means we can only expect about 3 global trainees each time. Hence one of the reasons people were far less upset with Zero Base 1's lineup than Kepler's. They just knew what to expect. Speaking of the editing, Mnet can and will manipulate everything, so even though most fans still aren't hyper aware of editing, more did start to pay it more attention and pay more attention to the tactics that Mnet uses. This includes things like the structure of the show, the use of the mentors, the scoring systems, access to rewards, interim checks, and so on. Speaking of interims, Island 2 revealed how little time groups have to practice before the interims, which is just one example of how Mnet uses the structure of the show for stories. In this case, the large gap between the interims and actual performance allows the fast improvement that Mnet implies, when instead it just means that the final performance was made with the full 2 weeks of practice, not just 1 day of practice. So of course it'll be better. The implications of the show and its legacy? I mean, it rebooted Produce, but at a cost. Kepler were the first produce group to fail, and Girls Planet was poorly received, hence why Mnet probably went with a smaller scale show for their second female season with Island, and Boys Planet will be back in force in 2025 and 2026. We also developed several tropes and names for things. Not only were fans far more aware of evil editing after Chaibing and Ruchi, but they were also far more aware of angel edits too after Dion, and were aware of Mnet's insane ability to draw things out and make them needlessly dramatic. The largest name or trope that came from Girls Planet was Urina, which became a verb and even an adjective used to describe trainees such as Matthew or Keita on Boys Planet, and Fuko in Island 2. The other common one was a Dion, as in the Mnet favourite. We had some comparisons between Dion and Salang in Island 2, and some between Dion and Gunnock in Boys Planet, but that was about it. Mostly people just wish for a Dion situation to never happen again, and it kind of hasn't. I've mentioned this in both my Zero Base 1 episode and other Kepler minisodes I've made, but the biggest legacy and impact of Girls Planet was that Boys Planet was just a far better show, and Zero Base 1 were arguably a far better group. Fans course corrected after Girls Planet, and so did Mnet, which made Zero Base 1 more well-rounded and arguably less manipulated by Mnet's editing and xenophobia, which in my opinion is a really good thing. It was great to see the fans learn and for this to have an impact on the group. However, as I've said before and will say again, it's a shame that Girls Planet and Kepler had to be sacrificed for that to happen. And with that, I've finished everything I have to say for now. Let's wrap up this double episode. Girls Planet 999 was an Mnet K-pop survival show which ran in mid-2021 and produced the project group Kepler. Girls Planet had many controversies, as did the final lineup, but in the end it did help Mnet revive Produce, and remains close to many fans' hearts. The show also served as a great learning opportunity where the fans were able to create a better group on Boys Planet because of their knowledge of the systems put down in Girls Planet. In this double episode, I've discussed the history of the show and controversies associated with it, my eventual top 9, and have discussed every single episode on the show, while looking at specific structural, editing and on-set choices made by Mnet in order to push trainees either up or down. I then looked at the main storylines the show created, which shows that Mnet basically got almost every trainee right where they wanted them. This segment also demonstrated the classic Mnet strategy of evil editing a Chinese trainee, angel editing a Korean trainee in opposition to them, and invisible editing the Japanese trainee in the group. A strategy which many fans became more aware of after Girls Planet, and thus worked to ignore in Boys Planet. It also meant that very few Japanese trainees were voted into the final rounds, and very few of them had storylines. My key takeaways are: Suyeon is brilliant, Ziyin is gorgeous, Mnet actually didn't hate Bahie, Yujin and Bora are actual angels, Dion kind of lost on the show actually, and Gunnock is the best. Yep, there you go. Also, my hot take is that the cells were actually really good, and my less hot take is that the Planet Pass was brilliant and should have stayed for Boys Planet. And with that, we reach the end of this double episode. I want to discuss more survival shows in the future: Boys Planet, Produce, Island 1 and 2, Starlight Boys and more, but survival shows are a lot of effort to watch and analyse, so that might be a bit more of a distant thing. For now, I hope you enjoyed this look at Girls Planet, probably 4 years or more after it started by the time I release this video. And that's the end of the episode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.